line across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, on TV, radio and online. It's action-packed today. Fireworks over illegal immigration, a police scandal, an NHS scandal and an update on little Matty Hancock in the jungle. Starmer versus Sunak kicked right off over immigration. Do you think we've lost control of our borders? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Sir Keir certainly does, but I don't hear him offering a solution. Sunak may well have the answer. He's now backing Braverman, finally, which is good because it seems she's one of the only people in Parliament who actually cares about stopping small boats crossing the Channel. And there might be a plan in place to deport fake Albanian asylum seekers quicker than they can say, "Where's my four-star hotel mate?" They want to change these ridiculous modern slavery laws and local councils bite back. That's right, as many as 4 of them have taken legal action against the government to stop asylum seekers being dumped in their area. Some of them are Labour, rather predictably as well, some Tory. Would you protest about migrant hotels in your area? That's what I want to know. Would you protest against them? Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Also, it looks like Liz Truss left her flip-flops in Downing Street because Rishi Sunak has U-turned over going to COP27. Why is he going to talk about the Global Climate Summit when he has enough problems right here at home? Mark my words, it'll mean higher green taxes, more of your money leaving your pocket as yet another PM gives in to a ridiculous, obsessive Swedish teenager. Also, we're in the hometown of the Dover Migrant Centre fire bomber. He's been named now as Andrew Leake, a 66-year-old from High Wycombe, who Counter-Terror Police say was, quote, driven by hate. We'll bring you the latest on that. There's a police scandal brewing. Criminals and sexual predators have been allowed to join some of our police forces. A damning report has found that officers were cleared to join after committing offences such as robbery, indecent exposure and possession of controlled drugs. Now, I know there's a recruitment crisis, but surely hiring PC Flasher is probably a step too far by anyone's standards. And little Matty Hancock latest, that's right. He's defended his decision to go into the jungle to join the cast of I'm a Celebrity. He says he, quotes, hasn't lost his marbles. His jungle picture has just dropped as well. We'll show you that in a little bit. It looks like a Labrador trying to lick an ice cream while sitting on the wrong side of a window. Big question today, though. Would you protest an asylum seeker hotel in your area? Some local councils are. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Before that, it's your latest headlines.
A very good afternoon. 3 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The Prime Minister has admitted not enough asylum claims have been processed, but says action is being taken to fix it. Rishi Sunak's been under pressure to sack his Home Secretary, but he defended Suella Braverman during PMQ, saying they're on the same page when it comes to tackling migration. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, blamed the Conservatives for breaking the asylum system. He also said the bookies believe there's a better chance of the Home Secretary becoming party leader than processing a claim within 12 months.
She did get one thing right. She finally admitted that the Tories have broken the asylum system. Criminal gangs running amok. Thousands crossing the Channel in small boats every week. Hardly any claims processed. So why doesn't he get a proper Home Secretary, scrap the Rwanda gimmick, crack down on smuggling gangs, end the small boat crossings, speed up asylum claims and agree an international deal on refugees? Start governing for once and get a grip.
Can say is the significant action that the Home Secretary has taken to fix the issue. Since September, 30 more hotels with 4,500 new beds, appointing a senior general to control the situation at Manston, and indeed increasing the number of staff there by almost a half, Mr. Speaker. These are significant steps to demonstrate that we are getting a grip of this system. But this is a serious and escalating problem. We will make sure that we control our borders, and we will always do it fairly and compassionately because that's the right thing.
The Prime Minister is reviewing the pledges he made during the Tory leadership campaign to decide if they're still deliverable. Downing Street says it reflects how much the economic situation has changed since the summer when Rishi Sunak ran against Liz Truss. Well, earlier, the Prime Minister reversed his decision on attending the COP27 climate summit, saying he will now go to the event in Egypt next week. Thousands of corrupt police officers could be serving in England and Wales, with a report blaming poor vetting. After examining 8 forces, the police watchdog found officers convicted of domestic abuse or accused of sexual assault were employed. It said the vetting process is questionable at best and found a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female police officers. The report's author, Inspector of Constabulary Matt Parr, told us the findings are disappointing.
Is vetting strict enough? And the answer is no. That means there's a too great a chance of the wrong people joining. Secondly, did the police deal with misconduct strictly enough? The answer to that is also no. That means too many of the wrong people are allowed to stay in the forces. And thirdly, what is a culture of misogyny and sexualised, predatory sometimes behaviour towards women, like in policing? And the answer to that is not good at all. So yes, it's a disappointing report and not at all what we expected.
The National Police Chiefs Council Chairman, Martin Hewitt, told a Parliamentary Select Committee they're trying to address the problems that have been identified.
It's an awful report from the perspective of the service. Those examples there, but we have to deal with those, and we are dealing with those. But we've got to work through and continue to do that. And sadly, what I think that will mean is there will be more stories of, Officer X being sacked for this behaviour and that. But I'm comfortable with that because we've got to be open and demonstrate that we're not prepared to accept this kind of behaviour in our organisation.
The price of basic food items like tea, sugar and milk have risen significantly over the last month. Food inflation reached a record high of 11.6%, with the price of fresh foods rising the farthest. The British Retail Consortium says the higher cost of ingredients, energy and worker shortages have pushed up prices. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has defended his decision to appear on a reality TV show. Arriving in Australia to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, he says the show will take him to a place where the people are, not sitting in ivory towers in Westminster. Matt Hancock resigned from Cabinet last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. He's had his Conservative whip suspended. The Labour Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says Matt Hancock should be focusing on politics and his constituents.
I don't have a problem with politicians going on all sorts of light entertainment programmes and places where you reach a slightly different audience. I think politics has turned a lot of people off and we've got a lot of work to do to rebuild trust. But it's such a big commitment of time in another country, detached from the real world, and you can see whether it's Matt Hancock's constituents or indeed the COVID bereaved families that are feeling aggrieved. I think he's let himself down, but I think he's also let political life down as well.
You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Let's get stuck in. Local councils are now in open revolt over the migrant hotel scheme. 4 of them have launched legal action against the Home Office. They've had enough of it. Surprise, surprise, they say it's ruining their local area. Shock. Sir Keir Starmer has told Rishi Sunak to start governing for once and get a grip of the UK's broken asylum system, despite offering no real solution himself, as far as I can tell. The local authorities across the UK are saying that the plans impact their tourism revenue due to the hotels in hotspot tourist destinations being booked out. They've also said that it risks local jobs, breaches planning rules and puts additional pressure on already stretched services. Well, you don't say. How predictable. An interim injunction was granted last week for Ipswich Borough Council after the Home Office planned to house roughly 200 asylum seekers in a 4-star hotel in the area. It comes after, let's round it up, 39,500 people have now crossed the Channel on small boats so far this year, compared to 28,500 in 2021. Would you protest against a migrant hotel in your area? Would you want your local council to start legal action to stop it? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I want to hear from you on that one. The government is looking to change modern slavery laws, finally, as well, to get fake asylum seekers sent back to Albania before they can ask where their nearest 4-star hotel is. And Sunak has finally backed Braverman. That took a little while. Within the last hour or so, the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, has hit out at the UK for suggestions that Albanians are coming to the UK to get involved in criminal gangs. So he tweeted, targeting Albanians, as some shamefully did when fighting for Brexit, as the cause of Britain's crime and border problems, makes for easy rhetoric but ignores hard fact. Repeating the same things and expecting different results is insane. Ask Einstein. Well, I mean, it doesn't take Einstein to figure out that now an increasing number of Albanians, including supposedly 2% of their adult male population, are already in the United Kingdom, and that a lot of them are getting involved in underworld crime. 70% of the 140,000 Albanians who have moved to the UK were living in Italy and Greece. This is it, he continues. And 1,200 of them are business people, he says. Albanians in the UK work hard and pay tax. UK should fight the crime gangs of all nationalities and stop discriminating against Albanians to excuse policy failures. Albania is a NATO country, he continues, and is negotiating its EU membership. The UK can and should do the same, not respond with the rhetoric of crime that ends up punishing the innocent. It's fascinating stuff, that. Where do you all stand on this? Because we do have report after report, which is based, frankly, on fact, which shows that a lot of Albanian people are coming over here who are getting involved in underworld crime, the drugs trade, apparently the cocaine trade, and now taking over the cannabis trade from a lot of former Vietnamese gangsters as well. The money that is earned from that certainly is not having tax paid on it, is it? Let's turn to that heated exchange now, though, in the House of Commons today over the migrant crisis, because Sir Keir Starmer accused Rishi Sunak of losing control of immigration at PMQs. He blamed the last 12 years of Tory rule for the problems in the UK's asylum system. But the Prime Minister hit back, claiming that Labour had no plan to tackle the migrant crisis.
No one wants open borders on this side of the House. They've lost control of the borders on their side of the House. Mr. Speaker, four Prime Ministers in 5 years, and it's the same old, same old. He stands there and tries to pass the blame. If the asylum system is broken, and his lot have been in power for 12 years, how can it be anyone's fault but theirs?
The Right Honourable Gentleman, he voted against the Nationality and Borders Bill. He said he would scrap the Rwanda partnership. He opposed the ending of free movement of people. But not only does the party opposite not have a plan, they have opposed every single measure we have taken to solve the problem. You can't attack a plan if you don't have a plan.
He says he's getting a grip, he's got a plan. So let's have a look at that plan. The Rwanda deal was launched in April. It cost the taxpayer £140 million and rising. The number of people deported to Rwanda is 0. Since then, 30,000 people have crossed the Channel in small boats. It's not working, is it? He hasn't got a grip.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff there. I was just making some notes as I was listening to what Keir Starmer said again there. He's criticising the current plan. Well, OK, but what is actually his plan? He said the current number of people being deported to Rwanda is nil. Well, I suppose that's because people like him are trying to block it, aren't they, really? But there could be a glimmer of hope at the end of this particularly dark tunnel, ladies and gentlemen. And joining me now is GB News' political reporter, Olivia Utley. Olivia, one thing I wanted to talk to you early doors about is this modern slavery stuff, because a lot of people are using this as an excuse to stay in the country, saying that they were trafficked here under duress. I find that quite hard to believe, given that you've parted with supposedly your life savings and gone through numerous different countries and got on a small boat, a lot of the time whilst in communication with people who are already over here. That, to me, doesn't seem like someone who's been necessarily trafficked into modern slavery. But the government are trying to change that law to make it easier to deport people back to Albania. What's the latest?
Yeah, so this modern slavery law is very interesting because it is considered the biggest loophole in our immigration system. It was a crowning jewel, some might say, of Theresa May's premiership. So it's very difficult to reverse now. But the problem is that Rishi Sunak has no other choice. We've got to the point where you've got these small boats coming in all the time. As you say, Patrick, it's not at all likely that many of these 5,000 Albanians who've claimed to be victims of modern slavery are in fact victims of modern slavery. We know that these gangs are manipulating the situation. So yes, there's going to be new legislation apparently to row back on this modern slavery legislation. But at the same time, we've got these international treaty commitments to seriously consider any political asylum, however, request for political asylum, however absurd it might appear to be. So just rowing back on that modern slavery legislation, although it's certainly a start, because at the moment seriously absurd claims are being considered, it probably won't get us the whole way there.
No, it probably won't. Now, several local councils I've got here, Ipswich, Stoke, Great Yarmouth and East Riding, are launching legal action against the Home Office and indeed the government to stop the, I suppose you could say, dumping, really, of asylum seekers in their local area. They're saying that it's damaging the local economy because hotels are filling up. They're saying that it's damaging tourism, it's affecting local jobs, it's doing all of this stuff that, frankly, Stevie Wonder could have seen coming a million miles away. So, potentially now then, that could tie hand in hand with what's been going on in terms of deporting people to Albania. The strength of feeling about migrant hotels really growing, Olivia. But I just wanted to ask you a question. You live and breathe politics, and PMQs was today. Keir Starmer stood up, accused Rishi Sunak of not having a plan. What is Labour's plan?
Yeah, it's not quite clear what Labour's plan is yet. At the moment, it seems to all be about coordinating more with the French. Obviously, part of the problem is that the relationship between Britain and France's immigration systems have pretty much broken down. So trying to send small boats back to France, which is considered a safe country, so anyone coming from a war-torn country, although let's remember Albania is not a war-torn country, should be able to take refuge in France, but the French aren't enforcing that at all. The problem is that, of course, successive Conservative Home Secretaries have tried to create a better relationship with the French to make that work, but there's very little incentive for the French to take back migrants who've already crossed the Channel to Britain. So as far as we can tell, the basis of Labour's plan for immigration is to make that relationship work, but that's the what. We don't quite know the how.
Well, indeed, and just in the last few moments, Olivia, the Albanian Prime Minister has taken to Twitter to do a bit of diplomacy, saying that we need to stop saying that these people are coming over here and getting involved in crime and drug dealing. It's an interesting line of approach from the Albanian Prime Minister, because assuming, therefore, then he must be saying that they are genuine asylum seekers. So are they seeking asylum from him, which I would have thought is an odd angle to take on proceedings, really. But, I mean, dare I say it, Olivia, could our relations with Albania now be at an all-time low?
Yeah, it feels as though our relationships with Albania are definitely not doing particularly well. The Albanian Prime Minister, seems to be saying that they're not victims of people, that they are victims of people trafficking, which, as you say, seems like a bit of a strange line to take. But the only other option is that they're being trafficked into the country by Albanian gangs who we already know have taken a foothold in northern France. And there was a story in the Telegraph today about three Albanian criminals who've been building a cannabis farm in Britain, and £400,000 worth of cannabis has been found there. They've now been arrested, but they are claiming modern slavery. So it's very difficult to see how the situation gets rectified, because this modern slavery law is very much ingrained in the minds of these Albanian criminal gangs.
Yes, indeed. And just lastly, Olivia, these local councils, Ipswich, Stoke, Great Yarmouth, East Riding, Ipswich, I believe is Labour, for example, are now saying, hang on a minute, we've had quite enough of these people coming over here into our hotels and essentially being dumped. It's a tricky one for the government now, isn't it? Because if local councils, even a Labour council, are saying enough is enough, it's a bit all too predictable. I can't help but possibly wonder whether or not they should all be sent to places like Keir Starmer's constituency, for example, or dare I say it, a few of the Lib Dem seats as well. You might have to find one first, but a few of those, or some people up there north of the border, the SNP seats. I mean, if they really, really are obsessed with these people, maybe they should be the ones to house them.
Well, one very interesting element of this is that one hotel which has now been set up to house migrants coming from Albania is in Northallerton, in Rishi Sunak's constituency. So it'll be very interesting to see how that dynamic plays out there. But if we are seeing lots of these migrants moved out of facilities like Manston and into hotels across the country, then we can expect to hear a lot more from MPs from all sides of the House who have a bit of a problem with that. David Davis, for example, has been quoted today saying that one hotel in his constituency, which has been earmarked as a potential safe house for migrants being moved out of Manston, isn't appropriate. He's got the backing of councillors from all sides, all different political parties. And I expect we're going to see that across the rest of the country, which will just put yet more pressure on the Prime Minister.
Just lastly, actually, Olivia, sorry, I know I said that last time, but I lied to you. Now I'm telling you the truth, because Rishi Sunak's line of approach on Keir Starmer appears to be, well, you haven't got a plan, which we've already discussed, and he doesn't have a plan because we are yet to hear it, but also the fact that he backed Remain and tried to get Jeremy Corbyn elected, which would have arguably put this country, certainly the latter anyway, in a bigger mess than the one we find ourselves in today, and certainly wouldn't have done anything to help us economically at this particular time. We'd have been double skint now, wouldn't we, if Corbyn had come into power? Some people are saying this is because Sunak's got nothing else. But actually, is this a useful line of attack against Keir Starmer? This supposed man of integrity standing there actually saying, well, hang on a minute, I did actually want Jeremy Corbyn to be elected for a while.
Well, I think that it definitely landed very well last week, and I think bringing up the issue of national security, Rishi Sunak mentioned that Jeremy Corbyn was friends with Hamas, supported the IRA. That is quite powerful, and particularly when the allegations against Suella Braverman for leaking that document, some people feel that those allegations are a little bit thin. This week, though, I thought it landed a little bit less well, and it could be that Tory MPs are sort of hoping that Rishi Sunak, who has a bit of a reputation for not being able to think on his feet that well, should start coming up with some different attack lines. That said, it still does ring very true with a lot of the Tory party faithful who were terrified at the prospect of a Corbyn government in 2019 and see Keir Starmer as partly to blame for getting us so close to that, what would have, by most accounts, been a catastrophic situation.
Olivia, thank you very, very much. Olivia Utley there from Westminster, and I think we can all agree that if she just turned around and saw that sign, it is time to repent and all will be forgiven. But yes, very shortly I'm going to be going to some of your emails, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Been asking you a few different bits and bobs so far at this show. The main one really is whether or not you would want your council to launch legal action to stop a migrant hotel in your area. So far, a bit of a mixed bag, but the vast majority of you appear to be saying yes. And Jennifer says, I would certainly expect my local council to do the same. We cannot have those people here. That's Jennifer's view, of course, but I want to hear from you all. gbviews@gbnews.uk. That is the news that several local councils, four as yet, you imagine that would rise significantly, possibly during the course of this show, have said, hang on a minute, we are launching legal action to stop these migrant hotels being placed in our area. They say it's damaging the local economy. They say it's potentially threatening local jobs and, dare I say it, as well, public safety. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be going to your views very, very shortly. Lots of laughs in the inbox as well about the idea that Labour's big anti-asylum seeker channel crossing plan is to do more business with the French. Yeah, good luck with that. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, you have been emailing in. I'll go to those very shortly. But before that, let's have a quick look at your weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. Wet and windy weather returns from the west during the rest of today. Heavy rain in places, coastal gales. We've already seen that in many spots, but it will be sweeping its way eastwards as the day goes on. This low pressure in charge, that's just to the northwest of the country at the moment, and there's a particularly active cold front moving into western areas as we speak. That's got some lively rain, some very gusty winds associated with it. Gales around Irish Sea coast transferring into the south coast as well as eastern Scotland for a time. The heaviest of the rain, though, by the end of the night will be across East Anglia and the southeast. Showers follow, and those showers will be most frequent towards the north and west of Scotland. Again, gales here, 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts, but where we get some shelter from the breeze, it is actually a chilly start to Thursday, so some spots in Scotland, northern England, dipping into the low single figures. Milder towards the southeast, but wetter here with some heavy rain continuing during the morning. Coming and going, I think, with that rain during the afternoon, but at times East Anglia and the southeast will stay wet. Showers will continue elsewhere, particularly across western parts of the country, and a keen gusty wind, particularly towards the southwest. A fresher feel, there will be some sunshine out there, temperatures at 13 or 14 Celsius, a bit lower than they have been. But it's going to be a lively evening, and into the early hours of Friday, some downpours will continue across southwestern and southern shores in particular, fuelled by warm seas here. Hail and thunder always a possibility, and the risk of some more prolonged heavy rain affecting southern counties of England. Elsewhere, clear spells and a chilly start to Friday, actually. Temperatures down below zero in some sheltered spots across northern parts of the UK, -3, -4 Celsius in some sheltered Scotland glens. But after that early chill, actually it's a bright day. There'll still be further showers in the west, but in between sunny spells. And it's going to feel fresher on Friday.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Welcome back, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News Live, and I've got loads coming your way. The big question I'm asking you throughout the show is, would you ask your local council to take legal action against the Home Office to stop migrant hotels in your area? Loads you've been getting in touch about that. I'll go to those emails in just a tick, but I want to let you know what else I've got in this hour. We're discussing the fact that apparently the police force is employing people who are basically criminals, including sexual predators and people who've been involved in robbery and burglary, for goodness sake. Good gracious me. I mean, imagine the HR are quite busy at your local police department right now. Could nurses vote to go on strike? The ballot from the Royal College of Nursing stops today, but it will be a few days before they've counted all of those results. How do you feel about that, especially considering the other big news that landed today, which is about the number of excess deaths? It's now higher than it was during the pandemic. Shocking stat that. Could it be, dare I say it, because of lockdowns? And talking of lockdowns, the man himself, little Matty Hancock, is going to be in the jungle. He's released a statement explaining his reasons why, and he says it's got absolutely nothing to do with money. Couldn't possibly be about the money. No, he says he's not lost his marbles at all. He wants to go where the people are. If I was Matt Hancock, I would go to where there are as few people as possible, and I would stay there. We are going to be talking to someone who knows a thing or two about what kind of creepy crawlies and snakes and things like that might, shockingly stuff, and you'd hate to see it, terrorise Matt Hancock in the jungle. But before that, lots of you have been getting in touch. We are the People's Channel, and we're going to talk to you right now. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Marilyn's been on. She says illegal immigrants should not be allowed the comfort of hotels when homeless veterans are ignored on the streets. Now, I get a lot of flack for this online, Marilyn. They go, why does it have to be one or the other? Well, I wish it wasn't one or the other. But it is, apparently, isn't it? Because we've still got loads of homeless veterans, something like between 2 and 3%. Some estimates put it as high as 6% of former military personnel now on the streets. Well, they're still there, and we are having people coming over the channel who are getting, in some cases, 4-star hotels. So I wish it wasn't one or the other, but apparently it is. And yes, I agree with you. I think it's an absolute national scandal. Dave has been in touch. Dave says, a thought has come to me regarding the problem of housing migrants. Here we go, Dave. Always dangerous to have a think. Instead of using expensive hotels, why can't we mobilise the rebuilding of the Nightingale hospitals? Yes, I asked this as well. The Nightingale type of buildings that we were prepared to use for the pandemic to house recovering COVID patients. If it was good enough for patients, doctors and nurses, surely it's good enough for migrants, both legal and illegal. One of the problems with that is some of them are now being used for their original purpose, like the Excel Centre in London. I believe the Principality Stadium in Wales was one, I think I'm right in saying. That's now football and rugby. So might be a bit of a stretch for Gareth Bale to dodge a few Albanians, although maybe they do play Albania. Anyway, Brenda says, no, I wouldn't support my council. They should go to court to stop immigration hotels. This wasting of our money on this issue has to stop. Yes, and there's a lot of this taking place right now. In case you're wondering why I'm asking this, is because 4 local councils, at least one of which is Labour, have now decided that they've had enough of migrant hotels in their area. They're going to take the Home Office to court, or at least start legal action anyway, against them and the government over this very issue. They've said that it's damaging the economy, it's causing local jobs, and dare I say it as well, it's a public safety concern. I want to know from you today, GBViews at gbnews.uk, would you urge your local council to try to take legal action? I've had someone on here from Cheshire East, which is actually where I was brought up, and she said that the council there is not actually telling them which hotels are being used. Why don't you email me back, whoever it was who was in Cheshire East, gbviews at gbnews.uk. I might know exactly where they are. I can have a look next time I'm back. Right, thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch. Keep your views coming in, but coming right up now, a damning report has found that hundreds of police officers have been given jobs despite, remarkable this, committing offences such as robbery, indecent exposure and the possession of controlled drugs. But first, it's your latest headlines.
It's 3:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The Prime Minister has admitted not enough asylum claims have been processed, but said action is being taken to fix that. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to sack his Home Secretary, but he defended Suella Braverman during PMQ, saying they're on the same page when it comes to tackling migration. Challenging the Prime Minister, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, blamed the Conservatives for breaking the asylum system. Well, meanwhile, Downing Street says the Prime Minister is reviewing the pledges he made during the Tory leadership campaign over the summer to decide if they're still deliverable. Earlier today, Rishi Sunak reversed his decision on the COP27 climate summit, saying he'll now attend the event in Egypt next week. Thousands of corrupt police officers could be serving in England and Wales, with a report blaming poor vetting. After examining 8 forces, the police watchdog found officers convicted of domestic abuse or those who'd been accused of sexual assault who'd been employed. It says the vetting process is questionable at best and found a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female officers. The price of basic food items like tea, milk and sugar has risen significantly over the last month. Food inflation reached a record high of 11.6%, with the price of fresh foods rising the fastest. The British Retail Consortium says higher costs of ingredients, energy and a shortage of workers have pushed prices up. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.1474 and €1.1621. The price of gold is £1,435 and 42 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,151 points.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case.
Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back, everybody. It's an action-packed show, this. We're just going to take a little bit of a step away from what's been going on in the channel, although keep your views coming in, because 4 local councils have said that they're now going to start legal action against the Home Office to stop people being dumped in their area in hotels. Do you want your local councils to do the same? GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be talking about all of that. But something else that I think is very, very close to your heart, it certainly should be, because health affects us all, and it's the latest figures from the Office for National Statistics, which show that excess deaths in England and Wales are now currently running higher than they were during the COVID pandemic. Throughout October, there have been an average of 1,564 extra deaths per week. Oh, goodness gracious me, hang on a minute, isn't this a pandemic? Compared with a weekly average of just 315 in 2020 and 1,322 in 2021. So a massive increase in excess deaths. Fascinating stuff, because there were articles back in July, weren't there, saying hang on, some of these excess deaths can't actually be linked to coronavirus. Oh, I wonder what it could be. Could it be lockdown related? Experts have warned that some deaths have been caused by collateral damage from the pandemic, as well as the huge backlog of people waiting for treatment. There have also been concerns about the general public simply not seeking help because they're anxious about burdening an already strained health service. Joining me now on the show is Professor Angus Dalgleish, who's Professor of Oncology at St George's Hospital Medical School. Thank you very, very much for joining me, Professor Angus. What's the solution then? Do we just lob more money at the NHS, just keep it coming?
Well, if that's the question, I would say that's a different question from the cause of the excess deaths. With regards to the cause of the excess deaths, I think that it largely is due to the fact that we shut down the NHS for ages in 2020, and we concentrated on COVID. And there was many of us who cried that this was inappropriate because we weren't able to look after our normal patients, and cancer patients and heart patients, the neurological patients. They were all left to get on with whatever it was. They weren't being treated, and we knew that this delay would result in a great excess deaths. And relative to the excess deaths, that we should actually be in a period now, post 2 or 3 waves of the pandemic, where the deaths are actually below the normal. So this is a really, really major signal, and many people have been calling out for it should be investigated.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And I, for one, Professor Angus, I'm wondering where on earth Chris Whitty is. We know where little Matty Hancock is. He's down under, for want of a better phrase. Not the first time he's been there, is it? He's in Australia now. He's going to be in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which makes me feel physically sick, to be honest with you. Chris Whitty used to stand up to us, didn't he, and say, we've had this many people die today. We need to lock down the NHS. Well, hang on a minute. We've had 1,500 excess deaths a week, for goodness sake, in October. That's getting towards pandemic territory, if you ask me. What should we have done, though, Professor Angus? I don't want to be in danger of calling you Captain Hindsight here. What should we have done during the COVID pandemic to prevent this?
Well, you won't need to call me Captain Hindsight, because I actually made it very, very clear at the time, and I told everybody involved in government decisions that I could at the time that a lockdown would be an absolute disaster, and it was not needed for an airborne disease. And they seem to get very confused between what's a lockdown and what is quarantine. We should have been quarantining people coming in from Wuhan and China, etc., not locking down people in their homes in London when it was an airborne disease. And I honestly don't think it made much difference. An official inquiry reckoned that we probably saved 200 deaths from locking down. But look at the collateral damage. Thousands of extra people dying of, it's mainly, I've looked at as much of the figures as we can from the ONS. This current excess really does look mainly cardiac. People who didn't have their blood pressure checked, or their arrhythmias treated properly, or pacemakers, etc. But from my point of view, we're going to see a wave of cancer deaths, and we're starting to see excess cancers, which would not have been presenting had it not been for the lockdown, because they would have been picked up and treated early. And I've always said with cancer, if you treat it early, it's curable. If you delay it or push it down the line, then it presents often too late.
No, 100%. And I've seen here just some stats I've got in front of me now. 40,000 fewer people diagnosed with cancer in lockdown 2020 compared to 2019. That's got a knock-on effect, OK, because that will take a while for it to become serious. And therefore, exactly what you were saying is we're staring down the barrel now of massive, I would argue, in many of them, avoidable cases of cancer deaths. And that is shocking stuff. Can I just pick you up on something I thought you said there? Did you say you've seen figures that suggest that the lockdowns prevented 200 deaths? Is that it?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, that was a wild calculation, speculation. But the bottom line was that when they looked at it very carefully, it was published in a reputable journal, is that they said it probably only saved about 200 deaths. So but you've got to put it into the context that this is an exchange of tens of thousands of extra deaths from everything else. So, well, and the economy, yet again, it's more evidence that we did not need to do lockdown. It was a disaster, and now we're paying for it money-wise too.
Well, and the economy as well, which is in the toilet, let's be honest. Mental health crisis, increased rates of alcoholism, child's education. There was a report that came out yesterday that said that every 5 days a university student takes their own life, and no one can tell me that hasn't got something to do with the fact that they were locked in a university dorm with a bunch of strangers away from their parents for the first time during some of the most formative years of their life. I mean, I'm not being funny, but are we owed a massive apology from Chris Whitty here or someone else?
We should have some explanation. We should have some explanation as to why they listened to somebody making vastly speculative predictions of what would happen if you didn't lock down. I refer to the Imperial College team, who were spectacularly wrong in every other prediction. So why did they do that when doctors at the coalface, like myself and Carol Sikora, as a fellow oncologists, we all said this will be a disaster if you lock down. It will achieve very little, but it will destroy cancer services. And it did, and we're going to be paying for that big time. But as you said, the mental health issue is also now coming to the fore. And in my own small area in the village, I'm aware of a couple of people who basically committed suicide not that long ago, not during the lockdown. But the one person I did know, the feedback was that he sacrificed so much in the lockdown, and it was the realization that it wasn't worth it. He sacrificed all the time socializing, everything, and that it was just drove him into a spiral of depression, and then he killed himself. Absolute tragedy. And then I heard of another person who I did not know well, and I'm sure that's been repeated all over the place. It was the fact of wasted lives, wasted education, wasted everything.
Wasted everything, and as well, another utterly unforgivable element of this is the amount of people, mostly women, mostly children, who will have been locked essentially in a home prison with their domestic abuser for that length of time as well. The layers to this are unbelievable, like an unrelenting onion of misery, Professor Angus. I just want to finish with you on this point, which is we are where we are. I hate this phrase, and it's all very well and good pointing the finger of blame, and I certainly intend to keep pointing that finger of blame, because people need to be able to account for this, actually. These holier-than-thou people who came and lectured us all and made out that anyone who disagreed with them was a mug, and in some cases cost them their job, right? I'm fuming about all of this, which I think is pretty obvious. But we've got this amount of excess deaths now, something like 1,500 a week. How do we sort this out? Because we've got to get out of this mess.
Well, we have to find out really what the cause is properly of these excess deaths. There's a group in Oxford, and Carl Hennigan has been looking at this on a weekly basis and publishing the findings, because we have to see, is there anything that we can do about this to stop it or reduce it? I doubt that there is that much that we can do. But one of the things we also have to look at is what we're doing adding to it. And, I am not very keen on the booster program for the vaccines because, as I've explained before, it boosts the response to a virus that disappeared from the Earth about a year ago. And there's 2 papers showing it does nothing. Even if they think it's been adapted for Omicron, it will not protect it against Omicron. So we have to ask all these questions and go through them properly, scientifically, and find out exactly what was going on. And we do know from that, you mentioned Chris Whitty, we do know he overruled advice with regards vaccinating children. And I think that has to come out. There needs to be a proper inquiry, accountability for all these decisions.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, it's shocking stuff. Professor Angus, this will not be the last time I talk to you. Hopefully I'll speak to you again very, very shortly. Professor Angus Dalgleish, Professor of Oncology at St George's Hospital Medical School, just reacting to that story that dropped today, which is a shocking level of excess deaths, now about 1,500 a week, higher than it was during the pandemic. Remarkable that, isn't it? OK, I don't want to be called Captain Hindsight or anything, but there is a massive case of I told you so going on here, and I, for one, intend to keep pointing that finger of blame. In fact, one of the people who's responsible, you could argue, is now earning something along the lines of 350k to go and eat witchetty grubs in the jungle, but we'll come on to that a little bit later on. Moving away, it's been revealed that the man who firebombed a Dover migrant processing centre before taking his own life at the weekend was 66-year-old Andrew Leake. We brought you a little bit of detail on this yesterday, but more's dropped now. He drove 120 miles from his home at Woodburn Green, near High Wycombe, to get to the south coast. GB News' very own Alice Porter has actually been in his hometown today, so she has the very latest, what is now being investigated as a potential terror attack. This is what Alice found out for us.
Well, the 66-year-old lived here in this quaint Buckinghamshire village, and neighbours have been completely shocked by what Andrew Leake did on Sunday. I've spoken to a number of the neighbours and they say that he was very pleasant, very chatty, that he was just an ordinary man. But on Sunday, he took the extraordinary journey all the way down to Dover, which is over 100 miles, where he threw 3 homemade petrol bombs at a migrant processing centre, injuring 2 members of staff, although not severely, before continuing on to a petrol station where he sadly took his own life. Now, counter-terrorism police say it's likely that the attack was sparked by some form of hate-filled grievance, and they conducted a search at this property behind me where they found a number of items of interest. There's also been a number of social media posts by Andrew Leake which have been discovered which express anti-Muslim and anti-migrant sentiment, although that was something that one of the neighbours was particularly surprised about. He's black and he spoke to me and said that they were very good friends and was incredibly surprised that Andrew Leake had those sorts of views. Now, police say there's nothing to suggest that Andrew Leake was working alongside anybody else. They don't believe there's any threat to the wider community, and therefore they are not declaring this a terrorist incident at this stage, although investigations are ongoing and they are going to continue to review that. The MP for North Thanet, Sir Roger Gale, described Andrew Leake as having severe mental health difficulties, but that he had no links to right-wing organisations. So in some ways this seems a totally random attack, but the impact was absolutely enormous because 700 of the migrants which were at that processing centre had to move to Manston Asylum Processing Centre, which is already overcrowded. So to have this sort of attack happen in this way at an incredibly sensitive time when things are all very, very, very volatile when it comes to those migrant processing centres in Dover was something the government would very much not have wanted to see happen.
Alice Porter, thank you very much. Just a little something that we're going to talk about a bit later on. Just quickly, I'm just getting something through. Apparently, some police officers have now been jailed for 12 weeks, been found guilty of sending gross indecent messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens. Mark Weiss, our Home Security Editor, is there at the court, so we're going to go to him shortly. But just before Mark White, our very own Liam Halligan joins me, our Economics and Business Editor. Liam, Brits are known for their love of a cuppa, OK? But apparently, what? We're too skint to have one now, are we?
What we're driving at here is the cost increases for buying basic, essential goods. The headline rate of inflation is 10.1%, 40-year high, but the actual rate of inflation, people's lived experience, if we can use that phrase, is much higher, not least for lower-income households because they disproportionately spend money on the essentials, petrol, diesel, bread, pasta, milk, and these goods are going up by a lot more than 10.1%. To them, the idea that their cost of living has gone up only 10% since last September is a bit of a sick joke. So numbers that have come out from the British Retail Consortium today show that the food inflation isn't 10.1%, it's actually 13 or 14%. But within that basket, if you drill down into numbers from the Office for National Statistics, Patrick, tea is last month, September 2022, was 45% more expensive than September 2021. Pasta was 60% more expensive in 1 year. Vegetable oil, which many households will use, many restaurants will use, quite a lot of, comes from sunflowers, that was 65% more expensive, not least because of less wheat and grain coming and sunflower seeds coming out of Russia, indeed Ukraine. Even milk was 30% more expensive because dairy farmers, they're having to pay more for their feed crops to feed their cattle. So what I'm getting at here is that 10.1% inflation is, for many, many GB News viewers and listeners, an underestimate of the real increase in the cost of living over the last year. So when we hear that inflation's at a 40-year high, it is, but actually it's worse than that. But there's a bit of a chink of light here. Bit of a chink of light. Gas prices are coming down on wholesale markets.
Yeah.
So that should put a bit more room for manoeuvre in the government's accounts. So when it comes to the autumn statement in 2 weeks' time, there may not be so much in terms of tax increases. And the other little chink of light is that Russia have said this morning that they are now back involved with a deal they've got between the UN, brokered by Turkey, to allow more grain ships out of southern Ukraine, the Black Sea, and onto the Med and global markets. So these sky-high wheat prices we've seen over the last few weeks when Russia removed themselves from that deal could now start to...
I tell you what else has been a really nice touch, global warming. Because I haven't had to turn the heating on yet. I've made it to November without turning my heating on once.
Good for you.
So have that, Putin. Yeah, anyway, all right, thank you very much, Liam. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. Right, make sure you stay in touch, ladies and gentlemen. GBViews at gbnews.uk. One of the key things that we're hanging the show on is whether or not you believe that your local council should start legal action against the Home Office and against the government about the idea that migrant hotels are being imposed in your area. It's happened in Ipswich, Stoke, Great Yarmouth and East Riding. And I want to know what you think about this, because actually, frankly, it's turning out to be quite a popular thing. Some of these councils are Labour as well, so it's not just all of the Tories. There is an argument, though, isn't there, to do what they did in the US at Martha's Vineyard, which is decide, well, hang on a minute, why don't we plonk some of these people in hotels in constituencies where the constituents voted for people who apparently really quite want open borders, or certainly don't have a plan or any idea to stop these people being deported, maybe in constituencies where MPs actually wanted to block the Rwanda deportation scheme. Perhaps those areas should be the ones bearing the brunt of it. What do you think about that? Loads of you have been getting in touch about all of this. Some outrage in the inbox, it must be said, about the idea that Keir Starmer's big grand plan appears to be to try to do better business with the French. Good luck with that one, appears to be the message. Just one here from David in Winslow. Not only have local people lost their jobs at my local hotel, he says that some have lost their home as well as some were live-in workers. And unfortunately, David, that is an all too common view that's happening, an all too common reality. Keep these views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But I want to bring you this now, a little bit of breaking for you. When the big news breaks, it does break here, because in the last few minutes, serving Met Police officer PC Jonathan Cobban and former MPS officer Joel Borders have each been jailed for 12 weeks after being found guilty of sending grossly offensive and inappropriate messages in a WhatsApp chat with Sarah Everard's killer Wayne Couzens. I'm just going to throw it over now to the expert when it comes to all of this stuff. It's our Home and Security editor, it's Mark White, who I believe is right there. He is indeed at Westminster Court for us. Mark, what's the latest, please?
Well, slight distinction that we need to impart here, that they have been sentenced to 3 months in prison each. However, they've been granted bail because defence have said that they intend to appeal that prison sentence that has been passed today. You're right in saying that Jonathan Cobban is a serving Metropolitan Police officer, and Joel Borders, now an ex-colleague, had shared what have been described as grossly offensive messages on a WhatsApp group with the killer of Sarah Everard, the former police officer Wayne Couzens, who of course was jailed for a whole life term for the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard in March of last year. Well, this group existed some time before Sarah Everard's murder. It was 2 years before her abduction, rape and murder, in fact. But those officers, a group of officers who were relatively new to the service, we were told at the time, were sharing these messages. Joel Borders, we're told, had shared messages about tasering people with disability, including people with Down syndrome, had made jokes about victims of domestic violence and had made homophobic jokes, as well as had his colleague PC Jonathan Cobban. Now, PC Jonathan Cobban is still a serving Metropolitan Police officer, although of course suspended at the moment. The gross misconduct hearings that would normally take place in such a case have been put on hold until the conclusion of the criminal trial. Now, they would have got underway because of the conclusion of this today with that 3-month sentence. But because we're in this sort of unusual phase, Patrick, where the defence will appeal the jail term. The two individuals have been released, so it is not fully concluded in that sense. So it may be a little while longer before we get these gross misconduct hearings at the Metropolitan Police. But a very disturbing case nonetheless. So officers who should have been there showing high levels of standard and there to protect the public were instead sharing deeply disturbing messages about what they thought about minority groups and about women and about the victims of crime.
Yeah, Mark, thank you very, very much for the very latest breaking on that sickening case, really. Mark White, their Home and Security Editor, and it ties in directly with something that's on the front of a lot of the papers today. Anyway, I'm sure you've seen it. Criminals and sexual predators join the police force. A watchdog has lambasted the forces for vetting failures, people with convictions for robbery, indecent exposure, domestic abuse, etc. I'm just reading it off the front pages there. Have been employed by the police force. All of that coming your way and much, much more. Shortly, we'll be going back to our main story of the day, which is that local councils have decided that they're going to launch legal action against the Home Office to try to prevent hotels, migrant hotels, from popping up in their area. Rishi Sunak thinks he might have a plan to deport some Albanians quicker by tightening, I should say, the opposite, tightening restrictions when it comes to people who are claiming they are victims of modern slavery. The Albanian PM has bit back, believe it or not. He said, hey, stop blaming us. It's not all us. We're not all getting involved in drug crime and underworld crime as well. Your views, people, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Do you want your local council to lobby against the introduction of migrant hotels? Just a cheeky little email to get you started as well from Parker. Thank you very much, Parker. Patrick, put your poppy on correctly. The green's supposed to be at 11 o'clock. I think I've now sorted it out, people, but there we go. Thank you for your ongoing support, Parker. So with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News Live, on TV, radio and online. Loads more coming your way, including hearing from a former Australian foreign minister on how they dealt with illegal immigration down under. Someone else is down under as well, Matt Hancock. We're going to get stuck into him very shortly. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
It's 4 o'clock, you wonderful people, and this is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, on TV, radio and online. Coming up this action-packed hour, the Albanian Prime Minister has hit out, you're hard, at the Home Secretary Suella Braverman, saying that we must stop discriminating against Albanians as an excuse for our policy failures. His statement on Twitter comes after Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer went head-to-head over immigration with new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. That was during today's PMQs. But I want to know, OK, what can be done to tackle this growing problem? It's costing us, well, roughly about £6 million a day to accommodate almost 40,000 illegal immigrants who've come across the channel this year. Rishi Sunak apparently thinks that we can actually deport some of them much more quickly if we tighten this loophole that's taking place at the moment where they can claim that they were victims of modern slavery, not before time, although, you know what, it wouldn't surprise me if Labour tried to block that as well. Anyway, a few moments ago, 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to a period of time in prison after sharing racist, homophobic, misogynistic and ableist messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. They have been bailed, however, ahead of an appeal. It comes the same day as a report suggests there is a brewing police scandal, which we're going to bring to you. Apparently, hundreds of police officers who should have been failed for their vetting checks may actually have been given the job in England and Wales. These include people who are apparently anyway been involved in sexual offences and all of this kind of stuff. It's going to be a tricky one, but we're going to get stuck into that with Mark White. And yes, that's right, little Matty Hancock, he's back. He's defended his decision to go into the jungle to join the cast of I'm a Celebrity. He says he hasn't lost his marbles. We'll find out more about that and, crucially, some of the creatures that are likely to cause him massive, unrelenting discomfort. I, for one, cannot wait to see all of that, not least because we're just seeing now the figures, the damning figures coming out about excess deaths, I would argue, as a result of some of the policies that he enacted. Can he hack the jungle? Frankly, I don't think I want him to hack it. And I want to hear from you. Get in touch. Email, as always, gbviews@gbnews.uk. It's popped up in the inbox. Keep them coming in. Do you want your local council, like 4 already have, to start legal proceedings against the Home Office to block migrant hotels in your area? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get in touch. Don't be shy. But now, it's your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and hello to you. And it's breaking news that you were just hearing about there from Patrick. 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison for sending grossly offensive messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. PC Jonathan Cobban and former PC Joel Borders shared messages of a racist, homophobic and misogynistic nature in the group in 2019. The pair have been bailed ahead of an appeal against their convictions at the High Court. In the meantime, thousands of corrupt police officers could be serving in England and Wales, with a new report blaming poor vetting. After examining 8 police forces, the watchdog found officers who'd been previously convicted of domestic abuse or accused of sexual assault were taken on and employed. It says the vetting process is questionable at best and found a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female police officers. The report author, the Inspector of Constabulary Matt Parr, told GB News the findings are disappointing.
Is vetting strict enough? And the answer is no. That means there's a too great a chance of the wrong people joining. Secondly, did the police deal with misconduct strictly enough? The answer to that is also no. That means too many of the wrong people are allowed to stay in the forces. And thirdly, what is a culture of misogyny and sexualised, predatory sometimes behaviour towards women, like in policing? And the answer to that is not good at all. So yes, it's a disappointing report and not at all what we expected.
Well, the National Police Chiefs Council Chairman Martin Hewitt told a Parliamentary Select Committee they are trying to address the problems that have been identified.
It's an awful report from the perspective of the service. Those examples there, but we have to deal with those, and we are dealing with those. But we've got to work through and continue to do that. And sadly, what I think that will mean is there will be more stories of, Officer X being sacked for this behaviour and that. But I'm comfortable with that because we've got to be open and demonstrate that we're not prepared to accept this kind of behaviour in our organisation.
In other news today, the Prime Minister has conceded that not enough asylum claims have been processed, but he says action is being taken to fix that. Rishi Sunak, who's been under pressure to sack his Home Secretary Suella Braverman, defended her during Prime Minister's questions in the Commons today, saying they're both on the same page when it comes to tackling migration. But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, blamed the Conservatives for breaking the asylum system. He also joked that even bookmakers believe there's a better chance of the Home Secretary becoming party leader than a migrant processing a claim within 12 months.
She did get one thing right. She finally admitted that the Tories have broken the asylum system. Criminal gangs running amok. Thousands crossing the Channel in small boats every week. Hardly any claims processed. So why doesn't he get a proper Home Secretary, scrap the Rwanda gimmick, crack down on smuggling gangs, end the small boat crossings, speed up asylum claims and agree an international deal on refugees? Start governing for once and get a grip.
What I can say is a significant action that the Home Secretary has taken to fix the issue. Since September, 30 more hotels with 4,500 new beds, appointing a senior general to control the situation at Manston, and indeed increasing the number of staff there by almost a half, Mr. Speaker. These are significant steps to demonstrate that we are getting a grip of this system. But this is a serious and escalating problem. We will make sure that we control our borders, and we will always do it fairly and compassionately because that's the right thing.
Meanwhile, Albania's Prime Minister is urging the Home Secretary to stop discriminating against Albanians. Edi Rama says Albanian migrants aren't responsible for Britain's crime and border problems, and the government is using them to excuse its own policy failures. That comes after GBNews revealed that Albanian criminal gangs are on the rise in the UK and shipping hundreds of millions of pounds back to Albania every year. Now, the Prime Minister is reviewing the pledges he made during the Tory leadership campaign to decide if they are still deliverable. Downing Street says it reflects how much economic conditions have changed since the summer when Rishi Sunak ran against Liz Truss in the contest. And the Prime Minister has reversed his decision not to attend the COP27 climate summit, saying he'll now go to the summit in Egypt next week. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has defended his decision to appear on a reality TV show. Arriving in Australia to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, he says the show will take him to a place where the people are, not sitting in ivory towers in Westminster. He resigned from Cabinet last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. He's had his Conservative whip suspended. You are up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Let's get back to Patrick.
Yes, welcome everybody. Now, a war of words has broken out this afternoon because the Prime Minister of Albania has sent strong messages to the Home Secretary over the government's views on Albanian migrants crossing the Channel into the UK. Edi Rama sent a message to Suella Braverman calling for her to stop, in his words, discriminating against Albanians to excuse policy failures during the migration crisis. He tweeted, targeting Albanians, as some shamefully did when fighting for Brexit, as the cause of Britain's crime and border problems makes for easy rhetoric, but ignores hard fact. Repeating the same things and expecting different results is insane. Ask Einstein. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have taken Einstein, would it, to figure out exactly what's going on in the Channel at the moment, as a lot of people, unfortunately, here are claiming, anyway, that they are asylum seekers from Albania, when in fact they're actually not. And they do have every intention of getting involved in organised crime, as, unfortunately for old Edi Rama, the facts show. But anyway, 70% of the 140,000 Albanians who have moved to the UK are living in Italy and Greece, were living in Italy and Greece, he says. 1,200 of them are business people. Using the term business people quite loosely there, I think. Albanians in the UK work hard and pay tax. UK should fight the crime gangs of all nationalities and stop discriminating versus Albanians to excuse policy failures. Albania is a NATO country and is negotiating its EU membership. The UK can and should do the same, not respond with the rhetoric of crime that ends up punishing the innocent. I'm sorry, but actually that is quite a woefully inaccurate comment. In my personal view, because, of course, he could be arguing, couldn't he, there, that what they are genuine asylum seekers, in which case are they seeking asylum from him? Is he saying they are genuinely the victims of people trafficking gangs? I think anyone really would find that quite difficult to believe that all of them are victims of human trafficking gangs when it comes out to reports like our brilliant Home and Security editor Mark White did just yesterday about the scale of the problem when it comes to Albanian criminals getting involved in our drug-dealing underworld. They have now dominated the cocaine trade and they are dominating the cannabis trade, taking over from Vietnamese gangs. What is also an inconvenient truth for old Eddie Rama is the fact that a lot of the money from that, if not all of it, is leaving the country and going back to Albania, which, dare I say, it may well have something to do with the reason why he doesn't want it to stop. But there we go. Meanwhile, councils are hitting back at the government for, quotes, migrant hotels being used in tourist hotspot destinations. This is an all-too predictable story, ladies and gentlemen. I've been speaking about this for months, and it's finally happening. At least 4 councils so far have taken legal action due to hotels not taking any more reservations because the Home Office has block-booked all of their rooms. The local authorities across the UK are saying that plans are impacting tourism revenue. They're risking local jobs. By the way, can I just say they've taken local jobs because staff at loads of hotels have been sacked quite unceremoniously as a result of this. They're breaching planning rules, of course they are, and they're putting additional pressure on already stretched services, not least mental health services, GPs, etc., knocking down house prices, reducing business in the area, for goodness sake. It is a lose-lose. An interim injunction was granted last week for Ipswich Borough Council after the Home Office planned to house roughly 200 asylum seekers in a 4-star hotel in the area. 39,500 people have now crossed the channel, but I last read that out an hour ago, so we've probably hit the 40,000 mark by now, compared with 28,500 in 2021. Joining us now is a man in the know. He is Alexander Downer, who's the former Australian Foreign Minister. And Australia, quite famously, managed to get this right. I appreciate the geography is different, but I think the sentiment needs to be the same. Alexander, thank you so much. Can I just ask, first and foremost, what do you reckon the response of the Australian public in various towns and cities would have been if their major hotels had been taken over by asylum seekers, people had lost their jobs as a result, and the local economy was being damaged, and dare I say it, the local safety was being impacted? Do you think the goodwill of the Australian people would have lasted that long?
Well, of course, as time went on, they would have become, it's hypothetical, but as time goes on, people become more annoyed and more inconvenient. But what it goes to is the essential job the government has to make sure that it's the government that decides who comes to the country and the circumstances in which they come, not people smugglers. You can't hand over your immigration policy to people smugglers. I mean, and of course, you know, these people all claim asylum on the basis of, well, you know, it's all worked through with lawyers. On what basis could you make a claim for asylum? So one of the claims is that these people pay £5,000 or whatever it is to Albanian gangs. They get to the UK and they say, well, if you send me back to Albania, the gangs will kill me. And so, you know, that's a way around the asylum system. So it goes to what we found in Australia. These people game the asylum system.
Exactly.
And so you've got to be very, very careful how you structure the laws and what you actually mean by a refugee. You have to be absolutely clear about that.
Well, there's another angle to this as well, which is that we are already seeing cases of rival Albanian gangs on the streets of Britain. So whether or not they face a grim end when they go back to Albania, there's every chance they might face a grim end whilst they're here. It is importing foreign problems. And as well, on top of that, we are seeing various different loopholes being used. It's easy to say that you're gay, isn't it? And it's a very difficult thing to disprove. I certainly don't think any of us need to see the particular test that one might consider for trying to prove that an individual is gay. They can say that they will be persecuted in their own country, that they will be victim of gangs in their own country, that they will be victims of everything left, right and centre. I don't know about you, but I find it relatively hard to believe that somebody who is in communication with people over here, as one would imagine that the vast majority of people coming from Albania are, they've all seem to have mobile phones when they get on the old boats, don't they, that they would not be aware of the situation over here. From your perspective...
Sorry, the sound's not working. I can't hear anything.
Oh, that's all right. Don't worry. We'll try and get that rectified for you. But in the meantime, I'll just pass some comments, actually, because I'll be quite keen to hear from the British public at home, GBViews at GBNews.uk. Get them coming in. We have now 4 councils in the UK who are saying that they're going to take the Home Office to court or start legal action to stop migrant hotels in their area. And I want to know whether or not you would want that. And we've had a lot of people getting in touch. Gary has got in touch. He said he would love his local council to stop the hotels in his particular city. He doesn't tell me what city it is. He says he's getting far too much. A lot of people as well keep banging on about Cheshire East Council, which I think is absolutely remarkable. That's the council where I grew up. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Let's make sure that we get on to you now. Steve says, just drove through my local hotel, just drove through my local town, I think he must be, and the local hotel I've heard is being closed and is full of migrants. I drove past them and saw them smoking and laughing outside the front door. How is this fair? Peter says, if someone broke into my house, I wouldn't debate their right to stay. I would get the police to arrest him. So, OK, actually, let's play this one out, Peter, because let's just take this to the conclusion that you're using now. So someone breaks into your house, right, and you come downstairs and they're sitting in your living room, and they say, if you kick me out of my house right now, there's people out there that are going to kill me. Would you still have that same idea? Because unless you could see the people out there that were about to kill them, I suspect that you might assume that they might be lying and you'd ask them to get out nonetheless. We're going to go on to some more emails now as well. Darren says, councils must stand up for local citizens. Our community is very close-knit and we're worried about our local businesses and hotels. Can I just say some lived experience? So from the area that I live in right now at the moment, it's the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. Now, specifically around the Maidenhead area, there was one massive hotel, Holiday Inn. Quite a lot of business gets done in Maidenhead, quite a huge amount of business, actually. People stay there and they commute into London, they work around the local area, etc. Now, that entire Holiday Inn has been block booked and has been block booked for some time by the Home Office. What that meant was that staff at that Holiday Inn were told they no longer had a job. There were members of a health club at that local gym. They no longer have membership there. Local houses just on that road, big residential area, that will go up for sale now. Well, I imagine the value of those has been knocked off. And it also means that people looking to come and stay in the area will now not come and stay in the area. They'll go and stay somewhere else. So the overall economic burden is absolutely massive. And then you factor in the safety concerns as well. There are primary schools nearby. There's public footpaths nearby, in one case leading directly to a school. How safe would you feel about your daughter, for example, walking to that school early one morning or coming back maybe after some kind of sports club or whatever exercise it is after school late at night? How would you feel about that? How would you feel about your wife walking home from a train station in that area late at night? What about already overstretched public services? Oh, and don't get me started on the young single mums or the vulnerable or the military veterans who have been on a housing waiting list in these areas for years, who now, unfortunately, cannot get there because someone who, well, has just turned up gets it. How do you feel about that? Do you want to do what the people of Ipswich, Stoke, Great Yarmouth and East Riding have done, which is to try to get their local councils, and indeed get their local councils, actually, to launch legal action against the Home Office and against the government to try to block more migrant hotels in their area? Your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, there was a heated exchange in the Commons today over this very issue. Sir Keir Starmer accused Rishi Sunak of losing control on immigration at PMQs. He blamed the last 12 years of Tory rule for the problems in the UK's asylum system. He's got a point. He's got a point, because the Tories have been in power for 12 years and this issue has got worse. I would gently counter that with what the living heck is Labour's plan, and also aren't they trying to block the deterrent that is the Rwanda scheme? So there is that. But the Prime Minister hit back. He claimed that Labour had no plan to tackle the migrant crisis. Let's have a listen.
No one wants open borders on this side of the House. They've lost control of the borders on their side of the House. Mr. Speaker, four Prime Ministers in 5 years, and it's the same old, same old. He stands there and tries to pass the blame. If the asylum system is broken and his lot have been in power for 12 years, how can it be anyone's fault but theirs?
The right honourable gentleman, he voted against the Nationality and Borders Bill. He said he would scrap the Rwanda partnership. He opposed the ending of free movement of people. But not only does the party opposite not have a plan, they have opposed every single measure we have taken to solve the problem. You can't attack a plan if you don't have a plan.
He says he's getting a grip, he's got a plan. So let's have a look at that plan. The Rwanda deal was launched in April. It cost the taxpayer £140 million and rising. The number of people deported to Rwanda is 0. Since then, 30,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats. It's not working, is it? He hasn't got a grip.
Good grief. Right, OK, well, joining me now is GB News' political reporter Olivia Utley. Olivia, thank you very much. Goodness me, it's gone dark quick out there. It was light the last time I spoke to you. Olivia, yeah, so it was a bit of handbags at dawn between Starmer and Sunak. I've got to ask, what is Keir Starmer's plan? Because in some of those clips there, he said, Rishi Sunak needs to stop these small boats. Yeah, all right, how does he do it as far as Keir Starmer's concerned?
Yeah, so Keir Starmer's plan, as far as we can tell, is to work more closely with the French and to reach some sort of agreement with the French so that those small boats that are arriving on British shores can be sent back to France, which under international treaty should be possible because France is a safe country and they could be seeking refuge there. The problem is that successive Home Secretaries have tried to reach some sort of agreement with the French, and as yet that's proved pretty much impossible. There's very little incentive for French politicians to bear the brunt of the migrant crisis and take that problem out of Britain's hands. Then you've got the question of would Keir Starmer back the reversal of the Modern Slavery Act, which is now being hinted at by Rishi Sunak's team. That Modern Slavery Act was the crowning jewel of Theresa May's premiership, at least as far as she was concerned, and was backed very enthusiastically by members on all sides of the House. It's since turned into a loophole, and as some have said, the weakest point in our immigration system, because there are thousands of Albanians claiming to be victims of modern slavery in order, it seems, to get refuge here, because otherwise it's very unlikely that they would, given that Albania is not a war-torn country and in fact is looking at EU membership. So Keir Starmer, is he going to, if he puts his money where his mouth is, surely he would back the reversal of those Modern Slavery Act, but lots of his MPs were very supportive of it, so that's not clear at all. And otherwise, his plan is to work more closely with the French, which is all very well in theory, but in practice it's not entirely clear that that would follow through. On the other hand, Keir Starmer did sound strong today. I thought it was very interesting the way he did go so hard, so heavy, used all 6 of his questions to talk about immigration. And if you think back to the Blair years, Blair was all for open borders. Jeremy Corbyn too seemed very keen on keeping the borders as open as possible. So this is quite a big and drastic reversal of years, decades even, of Labour policy on immigration. And we are seeing a different Keir Starmer here who is very keen to talk the tough talk, at least.
Yeah, indeed, Olivia, thank you very much. Olivia Utley there, reporting from Westminster. Fascinating stuff. She raises a series of very, very good points. Keir Starmer, as far as I can tell, is on an incredibly sticky wicket when it comes to immigration. Tony Blair, of course, kick-started this whole mess that we find ourselves in now. Then Jeremy Corbyn, who Keir Starmer wanted to get elected and stood next to rather a lot as well, was pretty much a fan of total open borders. And now Keir Starmer is trying to position himself as being strong on immigration, despite not really having a policy and trying to block the Rwanda deal. So there we go. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, a serving police officer and former colleague have been sentenced to 3 months in prison each for sharing grossly offensive text messages with Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens. They've been given permission to appeal those sentences. They've been bailed in the meantime. We'll have the latest from our home editor and security editor, Mark White. That is coming your way very, very shortly after this break.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me. Noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, people, Patrick Christys here on GB News Live. Loads to get stuck into when it comes to the ongoing situation in the Channel. I'll be bringing you that shortly. The Albanian Prime Minister's kicked right off. We're going to be bringing you what he's had to say. He's criticised us for that, but I'm asking the big questions about these migrant hotels because 4 local councils now have decided that they're going to take legal action to prevent them happening in their area. Your views on this? GBViews at gbnews.uk. But moving away from that for a second, because 2 Met police officers have now been sentenced to 3 months imprisonment after sharing racist, homophobic, misogynistic and ableist messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens, the former police officer, of course, who murdered Sarah Everard in March last year. However, the sentencing judge agreed to bail PC Jonathan Coburn and former MPS officer Joel Borders, pending an appeal against their sentence. And it comes amid a backdrop of a new report by the police watchdog, which is across a lot of the front pages today, and probably isn't going away anytime soon, actually, about this supposed culture of misogyny, sexism, predatory behaviour still existing in many police forces, the recruitment process apparently not vetting people who have had a history of some of these pretty sickening crimes. Joining me for more on this is our Home and Security Editor, it's Mark White, who's at Westminster Magistrates Court. Mark, thank you very, very much. Let's just start with the most recent stuff first, which is this court case. Give us the latest on that, and then we'll have a chat about this report that's emerged today. So what's the latest from the courts, please?
Well, these 2 men, Jonathan Coburn and Joel Borders, now sentenced to 3 months each in prison for sharing, I should say, these grossly offensive messages, as they were described, on this WhatsApp group with, of course, a convicted murderer, PC Wayne Couzens. This was in a period before the abduction of Sarah Everard and her rape and murder by PC Couzens. It was a couple of years before that, in 2019, when these 2 officers, one now an ex-officer actually, and other officers who were relatively new to the Metropolitan Police Service were on a WhatsApp group sharing messages about tasering people with Down syndrome and other disabilities, also being disparaging about victims of domestic violence, and also passing racist comments as well. Deeply disturbing, according to what the trial judge said here, that she heard discussed, and she described the offences as being at the higher harm end of the spectrum, and that's why she felt it warranted a custodial sentence and not a suspended sentence or a fine. However, and I think that's these individuals coming out now. Let's see if we can speak to them.
Mark White is just going to try to speak to some of these individuals now who are leaving.
Can you give us your reaction at the sentence today?
Any reactions, sir?
Do you regret the comments?
Do you regret any of those comments at all?
Do you regret what you said? Yeah, well, you can clearly see that the officer there, PC Joel, or now ex-PC Joel Borders, has headed off. Didn't want to speak to me, didn't speak to anyone. They've been coming in and out of court with these COVID face masks on to avoid any kind of identification, but there they go. And they are, as I say, they're going to appeal their sentences because, according to the defence, they believe that actually it's not at the higher end of the harm category, that it is a lesser offence because they did not mean for these messages, however grossly offensive they might have been, to have been disseminated more widely to the public, or certainly for any of those who might be offended by them to know about it, because it was a private chat group. But the judge didn't accept that at all. She is firmly of the belief that it was at the higher end of the harm category, and that's why they've been sentenced to 3 months in prison each. And we expect that the Metropolitan Police as well, once the appeal has concluded, will get on with a gross misconduct hearing for one officer who's still serving, and Joe Borders there, who just skedaddled off into the distance, who has now left the Metropolitan Police.
Mark White, thank you very, very much. Our Home and Security Editor there outside Westminster Magistrates Court, just reacting to the sentencing and then bailing, of course, of those 2 police officers. One now a former police officer who were sharing just disgraceful, disgusting messages, really, in a WhatsApp group, the same WhatsApp group that Sarah Everard's depraved murderer Wayne Couzens was in. And Mark tries to get some form of comment out of one of those individuals there. Clearly they don't want to be seen. They've got the masks on and the hats on, etc., all too often. Right, I've got loads more coming your way very, very shortly. Trade unions have lobbied MPs earlier, called for an immediate general election. They also want strike action. Apparently the nurses' ballot from the Royal College of Nursing about whether or not they're going to go on strike, that closed today. That's going to take a little while for them to count the votes, apparently. Could we have a Donald Trump-style situation there? It's part of a campaign for a £15 minimum wage and other improvements to workers' rights. I think we all have to face facts here that Rishi Sunak is about to face massive, massive strikes. Will he face down the unions? Thank you, everybody, as well, who's getting in touch for our main topic of the day, GBViews at GBNews.uk, about these migrant hotels. 4 local councils now starting legal action against the Home Office to say, no, enough is enough. Do you want your local councils to do the same? Mandy does. Absolutely. The councils must stop the government from filling up our hotels. They need to control our borders. Now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories: 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison for sending grossly offensive messages in a WhatsApp group in 2019 and sharing them with Wayne Couzens before he raped and murdered Sarah Everard. PC Jonathan Cobban and former PC Joel Borders shared messages of a racist, homophobic and misogynistic nature. The pair have been bailed ahead of an appeal against their convictions at the High Court. Meanwhile, thousands of corrupt police officers could be serving in England and Wales, with a new report blaming poor vetting. After examining 8 forces, the police watchdog found officers who'd previously been convicted of domestic abuse or accused of sexual assault were taken on and employed. It says the vetting process is questionable at best and founded a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female officers. The Prime Minister has conceded not enough asylum claims have been processed, but he says action is being taken to fix that. Rishi Sunak, who's been under pressure to sack his Home Secretary Suella Braverman, defended her during Prime Minister's questions, saying they are both on the same page when it comes to tackling migration. Challenging the Prime Minister, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer blamed the Conservatives for breaking the asylum system. Meanwhile, Downing Street says the Prime Minister is reviewing the pledges he made during the Tory leadership campaign to decide if they are still deliverable. And earlier today, Rishi Sunak reversed his decision not to attend COP27, saying he'll now be at the summit in Egypt next week. And the price of basic food items like tea bags and milk have risen significantly over the last month. Food inflation reached a record high of 11.6%, with the price of fresh foods rising the fastest. The British Retail Consortium says higher costs of ingredients, energy and worker shortages have all pushed prices up. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick is back in just a bit.
And
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. We're approaching the business end of this show now, GB News Live, and it's action-packed, OK? We've been discussing what's been going on in the channel. The latest is that 4 local councils have now decided, one of them Labour, by the way, to take legal action against the Home Office. We're going to be talking about all of that to stop migrant hotels in their area. I want to hear from you. People have been getting in touch in their droves. I'm not ignoring you. I'll go to you shortly. We're also talking about the police scandal, because apparently they've basically been employing sexual predators and criminals and stuff like that, which is, I think we can all agree, not OK. And strikes, which is what we're doing now, because trade unions lobbied MPs today and called for an immediate general election. It's part of their campaign for a £15 minimum wage and other improvements to workers' rights, as well as bargaining rights for whole industries and a protection of the right to strike. Well, RMT General Secretary and everybody's favourite trade unionist, Mick Lynch, told GB News that the government ought to be negotiating with the unions. They don't negotiate with, I won't say it. His comments come ahead of another week of rail strikes on Saturday.
What this government should be doing is getting around the table or getting their advocates, the train operating companies and Network Rail, to settle a dispute. We've got a new Secretary of State who we're hoping to meet. We've got a new Rail Minister who we can meet. There is a settlement available to these issues. They are straightforward industrial disputes. We're not holding anyone to ransom, and in fact the public seem to be on our side, we believe, because they're being ripped off by this government in terms of their fares, but also in their workplaces. Everybody's not getting a square deal at the minute, and they want effective trade unions to counterbalance what the companies and this government are doing to them. Well, we think we've been very measured. We've taken 8 days of action, and we're going to take some more in the next few week or so. So we've spaced that out and gave people a break. We have to give 2 weeks' notice under the law. So we're taking quite a measured approach. We haven't gone all out. We're not disrupting every day of the week. We don't want to disrupt people. We want to run a service on behalf of the public and on behalf of the economy. We think the measures that they're going to bring are unsafe. They're going to cut back on maintenance regimes to achieve cuts in staff and cuts in funding. And we think that's a dangerous step. So we think we've got the public with us. The quicker we can settle this, the quicker the better for all of us. But the government holds the key to a settlement, and they've got to change the equation on their side of the table so that we can create a settlement with the companies that we are dealing with.
2 words: robot trains. Anyway, I'm joined now by rail expert Len Shackleton from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Len, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I think it looks as though, unless we fork out a load of cash, we're going to have to face down massive strike action. Is it feasible to give in to some of Mick Lynch's demands, or would it just bankrupt us all?
I think he's deluding himself to think that the public are, supporting him.
The railways have been supported massively by the public over the last 2 or 3 years. Billions of pounds, even before we went into lockdown and so forth. We were spending about 12 billion a year on on supporting the operation of trains plus the investment in the railways. And of course, nobody lost their jobs or suffered a loss of pay during the lockdown on the railways. So this is a privileged group of people. The Office of Rail and Road has just published an interesting report which suggests that they're paid about 9% more on average than comparable workers, right down the list, from the top level right down to cleaners and so forth. So this is not an underprivileged group that we should make a special case for.
To me, Len, as an economic expert, is people in the private sector are not getting pay rises in line with inflation. The majority of them, you would assume, are not. If the public sector do, or people who are on the railways, etc., get a pay rise in line with inflation, is it people like you and I who are paying for that?
Well, we're going to have to pay higher taxes. We know that at the moment. But to add to this by giving inflationary pay settlements to the public sector and a few private sector groups which are particularly well organised. But just remember that the trade union movement now only covers about 23% of the workforce. So it's a minority of the workforce. And to privilege this group simply because it's got the power to make life uncomfortable for us for a bit. But I think they're exaggerating their powers. I think every week that goes by, people are learning to live without the railways. And if they're not careful, they're going to have, when this is eventually settled, they're going to have a much smaller railway and a need for a lot of job cuts and so forth, which I'm sure Mick Lynch doesn't want.
I think a lot of people might have a lot more sympathy for them if the service that they provided was actually any good. I mean, every single day when I go to get on a train, there's some kind of delay or the toilet's blocked or, goodness gracious me, there's all sorts of stuff going on. I mean, trying to get on the Avanti West coastline, you've got a better chance of travelling by homing pigeon, trying to get from Cheshire back to London and stuff. I mean, it is pretty shocking, the actual service, I think, a lot of them that they provide. I mean, what would the cost be if we had to... I mean, it's probably impossible to quantify, Len, I don't know. But if we had to just bear up to, a nation without half of its trains running from now and again, is it a cost worth bearing? Is that cheaper than it is to give in to their pay demands?
Well, that's a very difficult one to call, Patrick. But let me just say, to be a little bit more even-handed on this, I mean, the government has made a right pig's ear of their attempt to reform the railways. This thing, Great British Railways, which we were promised in the Shapps-Williams report, if you remember that, it was about 3 transport secretaries back. Nothing has been done about that. We're now told that we won't get legislation on it this side of the general election. It's clear, they've put in a team of not particularly prominent politicians to run it, Mark Harper and so forth. They obviously haven't got a priority in sorting the railways out, and really, this is partly down to the government. Whatever you think of the rail unions, which but I think the government has to do something about it fairly quickly.
Can I ask quickly, Len, is it fair when people say, that the Labour Party are in the union's back pocket on stuff like this? Because people might be concerned, well, would it actually get worse if Labour were in? Because the unions have more sway with them and Labour couldn't, annoy the unions too much. They'd have to give in to it. Is there any truth to all of that?
Well, I think the Labour Party will attempt to sort of renationalise formally the railway, as they've done in Scotland. But whether that will, in the long run, improve matters for people working in the rail industry, I rather doubt. One of the ways in which the rail unions have managed to achieve quite a bit over the last few years is by competition amongst train operating companies. Once that goes, there'll be, it'll be just the government deciding everything, and that it will be problematic.
Len, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. Great to see you. Len Shackleton there from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Right, now, lots of you have been getting in touch. back into the terrifying world of my inbox we go, people, because I've been asking the question of where do we house asylum seekers, whether you would support your local council in housing migrants in migrant hotels, whether you would want them to take up legal action as, by the way, Labour Council in Ipswich have decided to take up legal action against the Home Office. They've had enough of it, haven't they? They've said, no, OK, all right, look, we'll welcome everyone in, absolutely. You've all got to care for them, but just not us, please, not in our area. Stoke, Great Yarmouth, East Riding, those 4 councils have said, no, we've had enough of this. Please, please, please stop it, the Home Office. Why have they said that, I wonder? Oh, yes. Oh, it's because it's costing local people their jobs who work in these hotels. There are safety concerns, and it's damaging the local economy because tourists can't come and stay there in these hotels. Neither can business people. I mean, for goodness sake, you could have seen this coming a mile off, couldn't you? But Francis has been on GBViews at gbnews.uk. Thank you, Francis. It's so obvious that rented cruise ships are the answer. Have P&O ferries got a few going, actually, I wonder? Why are governments not acting on this is difficult to understand. Look, there's this question, isn't there? If local housing stock is being reduced, we can't keep using these hotels, mainly actually because a lot of them are just already full, and you've got private rental stock being used. We don't want tent cities. I've been warning about tent cities for ages. It's going to happen unless we do something, maybe, like the lovely Francis has said. Why not get some cruise ships on the go? If the cruise ships were good enough for the likes of the P&O ferries customers, I'm absolutely certain they'll be good enough for people at least claiming to come from some war-torn countries. Janet says, we would like our city council to take action. We have 2 hotels currently housing immigrants, and guess what? There's another hotel looking like it's empty. So no need to say what that's going to be used for. And it's absolutely typical, this. And sometimes, just sometimes, the money's too good to be true for some of these hotels, OK? The money's too good to turn down. Because a lot of these hotels, bear in mind, they're bearing up to the post-lockdown era. No one could stay in them for far too long, which is ironic given they're now locking people in them, isn't it? But no one could stay in them, so hotel companies were on their knees, especially smaller hotel chains as well. They were facing the economic pinch. Well, up comes the Home Office. How do you feel about £1 million plus a full refurb? Well, I'll rip your hand off, won't you? Guaranteed custom. And no staffing cost, because we'll bin all your staff off and we'll put tin pot security guards in there. I mean, look, they've got them by the proverbials. Mike says, put them on an RAF cargo plane and fly them back. Do not put them up in a hotel. Mike, taking a direct route there. Interesting you should mention that, Mike, because that's been something that we've been discussing rather a lot here on this show, which is that the great loophole, the gaping cavern in our sanity and indeed legal system, appears to currently be that people can claim that they are the victim of modern slavery. Now, forgive me for being quite sceptical about all of this, in a way that I am also quite sceptical about how many of them are really children, for example. Forgive me for being quite sceptical about the fact that if you have travelled through numerous different countries, safe countries, and you have parted with your life savings, or indeed you are just an Albanian man, as indeed 2% of the adult male Albanian population is already here. It might be 3% by the time I finish this show in the next hour and 10 minutes. But forgive me for being slightly sceptical as to whether or not you are the victim of modern slavery, because you have presumably got contact with people in this country, you know exactly where you're going, and you are indeed paying somebody to take you there. So I have serious question marks about that. We are looking to close that loophole, or at least modify it, which would mean that someone who comes over from Albania, who is not immediately obvious anyway to be an asylum seeker, can be put on one of Mike's RAF cargo planes and flown back to Albania quicker than they can ask for directions to the local 4-star hotel. Latest figures, moving on, from the Office for National Statistics show that excess deaths in England and Wales are now currently running higher than during the COVID pandemic. This is a big story, ladies and gentlemen, an absolutely massive story. Health affects us all. It affects us, well, probably arguably a bit more than what's going on in the channel, frankly. But throughout October, there have been an average of 1,564 extra deaths per week, compared with a weekly average of 315 in 2020, 1,300 in 2021. Let's just break this down for you. More people are dying, excess deaths, than they were during the pandemic. And experts have now warned that some deaths have been caused by, shock horror, collateral damage from the pandemic, as well as the huge backlog of people waiting for treatment. There have also been concerns about the general public simply not seeking help. They're worried about overstretching an already overstretched NHS service. I had a professor on before, a doctor, an oncologist, who said in no uncertain terms that he could see this coming a mile off. When we locked down and we essentially shut the National Health Service down, turned it into the National COVID Service, this was blindingly obvious that this was going to happen, and it was the wrong approach to do. People weren't diagnosed with cancer, people weren't diagnosed with things like depression, various different other illnesses, and lo and behold, we're now seeing the knock-on effect of that. That was his view, but I'm keen to get the view of my next guest, which is the former chairman of the BMA GPs Committee, Dr. Lawrence Buckman. Dr. Lawrence, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Right then, what's causing all these excess deaths?
Mostly, it's related to the pandemic and the inability of patients to get through the door, not just the GP door, but the actual, the real door further down the chain. All those people with various illnesses, some of which turn out to be more serious than was obvious at the beginning, and those people should have been sorted out earlier. I don't like the phrase collateral damage, but I certainly agree with your previous correspondent on this, that actually this should have been dealt with in a more timely fashion.
OK, so, look, hindsight is 2020. However, various different people were shouting this from the rooftops at the time. Have more people died now as a result of our response to the coronavirus crisis than would ever have died from COVID if we'd have just not locked down, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think we would have had more COVID deaths. Whether you agree with the lockdown or not, the fact is it delays the number of people who are going to die of COVID. And the NHS was in danger of being overwhelmed, and the solution chosen was lockdown. We can debate the pro and con of whether that was worth it or not, but the excess deaths were absolutely an inevitable result of turning into an NHS that became a COVID service. It could have done nothing else. The solution clearly was to very rapidly ramp up services the moment the opportunity came to start clawing back what would then become excess deaths. And it was obvious to everybody, including me, and I broadcast at the time, saying, if we don't watch out, this is going to happen. And what a surprise, it's happening.
Yeah. Well, the NHS appears to be a bottomless pit when it comes to money. And we're hearing now about potential strikes for nurses. The ballot, and one of them closes today. Apparently it's going to take a few days or a week or so to count the results of that. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not nurses have voted to strike. We're also hearing about a recruitment crisis. We're hearing about people being overstretched, etc. We also are relentlessly being told the NHS needs even more money. We can point fingers all day long, and I certainly intend to continue to do that when it comes to the mistakes that were made during the coronavirus crisis and our response to it. But it is that horrible phrase, we are where we are. How do we get out of this mess right now? Because it's not good enough for people to go, well, Chris Whitty decided to shove us all into lockdown and now people are dying as a result. We need to sort this out now. What do we do?
I think the main thing we need to do is to operate on what I would call a war footing, or a COVID footing if you prefer, and we need to start delivering service. I'm going to use the phrase round the clock. I don't necessarily mean 24 hours, but certainly over a much more extended day. Well, the reason you can't operate it over 24 hours is because people can't go on working continuously. And even if you work in shifts, there aren't enough bodies. The biggest problem is not money. The biggest problem is bodies. There are not enough medical humans able to do the work to deliver. But we could work much more efficiently if we, for example, operated scanners through the night. I know patients would find it quite funny to come to a hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well,
if you've been waiting 2 years, if you'd be waiting 2 years for a scan, I think most people would think, oh, OK, I'll do it.
Absolutely.
And why not?
Absolutely, I agree with you. I agree with you. And just on that, Dr. Lawrence, because I'm going to have to let you get going, I'm afraid, right now, because we're very squeezed for time at the end of the hour. But I appreciate that. It won't be the last time we talk about this. Thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence Buckman there, who was, of course, the former chairman of the BMA GPs Committee. I've been thinking this for a while. If the biggest problem is, as he put it, possibly rather unfortunately, bodies. I think he means personnel there. It doesn't mean let the bodies pile high. That was a quote from the pandemic, wasn't it? But personnel, why not incentivise people more to go into medicine. So why don't we just scrap university fees for people who want to be a nurse or a midwife or anything like that? Is there not something we can do there to be a bit more creative, I think, and try to fast-track some people through? The answer cannot be just to import people from abroad because they need their own people over there. The answer cannot be to pay them a shed load more cash because that doesn't solve the problem and it bankrupts us all. Can we not incentivise them, scrap their student loans or something like that and get more people coming through the door? Get younger people coming through the door, get them trained up at 16. I don't know. Anyway, coming up, we'll have more on that migrant crisis, reaction to PMQs and little Matty Hancock's decision to join the cast for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Wouldn't it be a real shame if something, oh gosh, just one of those creepy crawlies in the jungle just crawled up his trouser leg or something. Anyway, stay with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News Live. Before that, it's your weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. Wet and windy weather returns from the west during the rest of today. Heavy rain in places, coastal gales. We've already seen that in many spots, but it will be sweeping its way eastwards as the day goes on. This low pressure in charge, that's just to the northwest of the country at the moment, and there's a particularly active cold front moving into western areas as we speak. That's got some lively rain, some very gusty winds associated with it. Gales around Irish Sea coast transferring into the south coast as well as eastern Scotland for a time. The heaviest of the rain, though, by the end of the night will be across East Anglia and the southeast. Showers follow, and those showers will be most frequent towards the northwest of Scotland. Again, gales here, 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts, but where we get some shelter from the breeze, it is actually a chilly start to Thursday, so some spots in Scotland, northern England, dipping into the low single figures. Milder towards the southeast, but wetter here with some heavy rain continuing during the morning. Coming and going, I think, with that rain during the afternoon, but at times East Anglia and the southeast will stay wet. Showers will continue elsewhere, particularly across western parts of the country, and a keen gusty wind, particularly towards the southwest. A fresher feel, there will be some sunshine out there, temperatures at 13 or 14 Celsius, a bit lower than they have been. But it's going to be a lively evening, and into the early hours of Friday, some downpours will continue across southwestern and southern shores in particular, fuelled by warm seas here. Hail and thunder always a possibility, and the risk of some more prolonged heavy rain affecting southern counties of England. Elsewhere, clear spells and a chilly start to Friday, actually. Temperatures down below zero in some sheltered spots across northern parts of the UK, -3, -4 Celsius in some sheltered Scotland glens. But after that early chill, actually it's a bright day. There'll still be further showers in the west, but in between sunny spells. And it's going to feel fresher on Friday.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello everybody, it's 5 p.m. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, on TV, radio and online. Coming up in this action-packed hour, strong words from the Albanian Prime Minister, who, frankly, has had the audacity to hit out at the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. He said she must stop discriminating against Albanians to excuse policy failures. His statement on Twitter comes after Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer went head-to-head over immigration with the new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak during PMQs today. I want to know what can be done to tackle this growing problem. It's costing Brits over £6 million a day now to accommodate nearly 40,000 illegal immigrants who crossed the Channel this year. It's just some big news that I'm bringing you, OK, which is that now 4 local councils, including one Labour, have taken action against the Home Office, legal action, because they say they've had enough of migrant hotels in their area. And I want your stories about what's taking place in your area. I want to know whether you're going to lobby your council to do just the same thing. In the past couple of hours as well, moving on, 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months imprisonment after sharing racist, homophobic, misogynistic and ableist messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. They were bailed ahead of an appeal. The news comes on the same day that a damning report suggests hundreds of police officers who should have failed vetting checks may be in the job in England and Wales, including sex offenders and burglars and people like that. Anyway, Mark White will bring us the latest, our Home and Security editor. And, yes, little Matty Hancock. He's defended his decision to go into the jungle and join the cast of I'm a Celebrity. He says that he hasn't lost his marbles. Some would argue he never had any to begin with. Look at that picture of him. Good grief. It looks like a Labrador licking an ice cream through the wrong side of a window. And I want to hear what you think. Get in touch. Email me. That big topic of the day. Would you want your local council to lobby the Home Office to take legal action against the Home Office to stop migrant hotels in your area? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Make sure that you stay exactly where you are, because the wonderful Polly Middlehurst is right here now with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News today, 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison for sending grossly offensive messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. PC Jonathan Cobban and former PC Joel Borders shared messages of a racist, homophobic and misogynistic nature in the group in 2019. The pair have been bailed ahead of an appeal against their convictions at the High Court. Meanwhile, thousands of corrupt police officers could be serving in England and Wales, with a new report blaming poor vetting. After examining 8 forces, the police watchdog found officers who'd previously been convicted of domestic abuse or accused of sexual assault were taken on and employed. It says the vetting process is questionable at best and found a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female police officers. The report author, Inspector of Constabulary Mark Parr, told GB News the findings are disappointing.
Is vetting strict enough? And the answer is no. That means there's a too great a chance of the wrong people joining. Secondly, did the police deal with misconduct strictly enough? The answer to that is also no. That means too many of the wrong people are allowed to stay in the forces. And thirdly, what is a culture of misogyny and sexualised, predatory sometimes behaviour towards women, like in policing? And the answer to that is not good at all. So yes, it's a disappointing report and not at all what we expected.
Meanwhile, the National Police Chiefs Council Chairman Martin Hewitt told a parliamentary select committee they are trying to address the problems that have been identified.
It's an awful report from the perspective of the service. Those examples there, but we have to deal with those, and we are dealing with those. But we've got to work through and continue to do that. And sadly, what I think that will mean is there will be more stories of, Officer X being sacked for this behaviour and that. But I'm comfortable with that because we've got to be open and demonstrate that we're not prepared to accept this kind of behaviour in our organisation.
The Prime Minister has conceded that not enough is being done with asylum claims and they haven't been processed quickly enough. But he says action is being taken to fix that. Rishi Sunak, who's been under pressure to sack his Home Secretary Suella Braverman, defended her during Prime Minister's questions in the Commons today, saying they're both on the same page when it comes to tackling migration. But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, blamed the Conservatives for breaking the asylum system.
She did get one thing right. She finally admitted that the Tories have broken the asylum system.
Criminal gangs running amok. Thousands crossing the channel in small boats every week. Hardly any claims processed. So why doesn't he get a proper Home Secretary, scrap the Rwanda gimmick, crack down on smuggling gangs, end the small boat crossings, speed up asylum claims and agree an international deal on refugees? Start governing for once and get a grip.
What I can say is the significant action that the Home Secretary has taken to fix the issue. Since September, 30 more hotels with 4,500 new beds, appointing a senior general to control the situation at Manston, and indeed increasing the number of staff there by almost a half, Mr. Speaker. These are significant steps to demonstrate that we are getting a grip of this system. But this is a serious and escalating problem. We will make sure that we control our borders, and we will always do it fairly and compassionately because that's the right thing.
Meanwhile, Albania's Prime Minister is urging the Home Secretary to stop discriminating against Albanians. Edi Rama says Albanian migrants aren't responsible for Britain's crime and border problems, and the government is simply using them to excuse its own policy failures. That comes after GB News revealed that Albanian criminal gangs are on the rise in the UK and shipping hundreds of millions of pounds back to Albania every year. According to new figures, there are now 10 million people who were born outside of the UK now living in England and Wales. ONS figures show that number has risen by 2.5 million since 2011, driven by an increase in Romanian arrivals. These statistics mean that out of a population of 59.6 million, about 1 in 6 people were not born in the UK. The Prime Minister is reviewing the pledges he made during the Tory leadership campaign to decide, he says, if they are still deliverable. Downing Street says it reflects how much economic conditions have changed since the summer when Rishi Sunak ran against Liz Truss in the contest. And the Prime Minister has reversed his decision not to attend the COP27 climate summit, saying he'll now go to the summit in Egypt next week. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
All right, people, we're in the final hour of this now, so strap yourselves in. Let's not mess about, because Rishi Sunak has admitted that not enough asylum claims are being processed, but promised to fix the system. It came in a heated Commons exchange with Sir Keir Starmer. The Labour leader told the PM to start governing for once and to get a grip of the broken asylum system. Yeah, all right, Keir, OK. I mean, some would argue that Tony Blair started it, Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't have fixed it and he supported him, but we won't get stuck into that now, will we? Today, at least 4 councils have taken legal action against the government, with hotels in their area no longer taking reservations because the Home Office has booked all of the rooms for migrants. I want you to tell me whether or not you want your local council to do the same. Are you going to email your local council, get in touch with them and say, hang on a minute, I want you to join this legal action fight now against the migrant hotels? What do you think? The local authorities across the UK, some of them Labour, by the way, are saying that the plans impact their tourism revenue due to the hotels being in popular tourist destinations. One thing I've got as a solution is just find a hotel next to where Gary Lineker is and lob them all there. But they've also said that it risks local jobs, breaching planning rules and putting additional pressure on already stretched public services. So exactly what we could all see coming, a flipping mile-off, isn't it? Of course it was going to impact all of those things, but those things don't matter because we've got to be compassionate. An interim injunction was granted last week for Ipswich Borough Council after the Home Office planned to house roughly 200 asylum seekers in a 4-star hotel in the area. A lot of people raising questions as to why they all have to go to 4-star hotels. I'm wondering whether or not we just have too many 4-star hotels, but there we go. It comes after 39,500 people have now crossed the Channel on small boats so far this year, costing the British taxpayer more than 6 million big ones every single day. The government aren't just facing criticism and pressure from groups here in the UK. Earlier this afternoon, check this out. The front on this, man, more front than Southend. The Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, has hit out at the UK for suggestions that Albanians are coming to the UK to get involved in gangs, despite the fact that they are. He tweeted, targeting Albanians, as some shamefully did when fighting for Brexit, as the cause of Britain's crime and border problems makes for easy rhetoric but ignores hard fact. Repeating the same things and expecting different results is insane. Just ask Einstein. Doesn't take Einstein to work out exactly why he's saying all this stuff. I'll come on to that in a minute. But 70% of the 140,000 Albanians who've moved to the UK were living in Italy and Greece. 1,200 of them are business people. Albanians in the UK work hard and pay tax. That's quite enough of that. We've seen enough from him now. There we go. Take him off. So, yes, I mean, some people would argue it doesn't take Einstein to work out that a lot of them are currently working in the drugs trade, and the money that they're getting from that is going back to Albania, and they're certainly not paying tax on it, are you? I wouldn't expect a cocaine or a cannabis dealer to be employing an accountant anytime soon. But thank you very much, Eddie Rama from Albania. Joining me now to discuss this is Stephen Wolfe, Director for the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity. Thank you very much. I was going to ask exactly what orifice the Prime Minister of Albania is talking out of, but I don't think we can discuss that at this time of day. He's got more front than Southend, hasn't he?
He's got more front than anyone that I've ever known. This is like one of the cheekiest things any Prime Minister of any country could say. We already have our security services, our high-end police, the border force, all indicating that the Albanians are taking over the marijuana situation in the UK from those in Thailand. That we know that they are massive in the cocaine sector and controlling huge chunks of the north of England. We know that they're smuggling in high-end cars. We know that they're in people trafficking and the sex trade. And for him to suggest that these Albanians are all coming over to start their own businesses, yeah, maybe the businesses they're thinking of is another cocaine section, another marijuana section. But that is the truth of the matter. This man is whistling in the wind. The facts are that people in Britain are suffering because of the crime wave that's coming from Albania and because our border forces are not returning them or moving them out of the country to Rwanda or somewhere else.
I can't help but wonder how well Albania is actually doing out of this. Good old Eddie Rama there discussing the fact that, hey, why don't we let it all go? They're taking it back in wheelbarrows, aren't they? I would imagine the Albanian economy is currently doing rather well out of the fact that people are shipping drug money back to his country.
Well, if you look at the wages, or someone suggested that they're only making an average between 5,000 and 10,000 euros a year as a young man working over there. And the police came out with a report that only yesterday they discovered £300,000 in a package, in a bag, being taken back to Albania, and another 500,000 in a car. They're the ones that are being caught. So we know that they're obviously shifting millions back to Albania. If they're shifting millions back to Albania, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be buying the houses, repairing them, buying furniture, buying cars. All of those are going to help the Albanian economy, just as we saw with the Romanians when they started illegally coming over here before they were given the right to stay here freely.
Stephen, let's just bring it a bit closer to home and let's talk about Ipswich, Stoke, Great Yarmouth, East Riding. I'm doing my Ricky Gervais impression there, Didcot, Yateley. But seriously, though, you know, these places now, the councils, one of which I think Ipswich anyway is Labour, are saying enough is enough. They're launching legal action against the Home Office. They're saying you cannot keep filling our hotels full of migrants, illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, whatever, because it's damaging the local economy, it's costing people their jobs, it's knocking down the house prices, there are safety concerns, and it is also putting increasing pressure on our already stretched public services, and let alone as well what they're doing when they actually end up staying there with the local rental housing stock. Forgive me, but has no one been listening to people like you and I for the last few months? I mean, this has been patently obvious, isn't it?
Well, we know that all the 2- and 3-star hotels have been booked up. That's why they're moving to the 4-star hotels. But, Patrick, let's look at this very clearly. Where are the hotels that the Home Office is booking? They're booking in the poorest white working-class areas of the East. They're booking into Labour Party areas where people can't have jobs. They're already pressure on schools and hospitals. I don't see them booking the whole of the Brighton hotel sector where people in Brighton say, welcome the migrants with open arms. I don't see them filling up the London 4- or 5-star hotels, which I believe they should be doing. I live in Winchester. We've got 2 big hotels in there. Winchester loves the idea of having migrants coming into it. You see them campaigning in the streets. Let's book the hotels in Winchester. Take out the whole of the marketplace for accommodation and those who want to go on a holiday to Winchester. Put them in the rich areas. Start putting them in the middle-class areas. And let's see how they feel. Because you noticed what happened in America, Patrick. The moment that DeSantis shipped a whole load of migrants from Texas into Martha's Vineyard, the tears, the cries, the upset that they're coming into our leafy, gorgeous areas, let's get them out of here quickly, because that's the double standards of the left, and particularly the rich left. Not in my backyard. Give it to the poor working class and let them suffer the consequences. We've had enough, and so have those councils. It's about time we saw real change.
Yeah, and our very own Nigel Farage, by the way, has just tweeted, keep your eyes peeled for this, ladies and gentlemen. He's got a whopping great big exclusive on his show a little bit later tonight. Some devastating opinion polling for Rishi Sunak on how the public feel about this migrant crisis. Make sure you tune into that. It's damning stuff. But if he keeps dumping them, or the Tories keep dumping them in kind of working class Labour areas, part of me thinks, OK, fair enough, because if they voted for Labour or whatever, then, you know, this is kind of what you get, because that's maybe what you would get under Labour, frankly. But I think what they should be doing is something I think you alluded to, which is why not slap them next to Gary Lineker's house? Why not slap them in Islington or places like this? Because once people, I think, these people, Stephen, just one more with you, these people say, oh, look, we need to be welcoming, we need to have this incredibly diverse refugees welcome centre. You know what a lot of those people do? At the first possible opportunity, when they earn money, they move out of the big city, they get out into the leafy suburbs, so little Horatio and Walter can go to school in a predominantly white school where there's no crime or anything like this. And actually, why don't we slap a load of these people there? Because then, frankly, they might change their minds about it.
Well, I got the same agreement to you. King Charles, before he became the king, argued that the Rwanda policy was wrong. But he has a huge estate in Scotland where he's got the city the size of Liverpool of land. We could put a tented community up there in his property. Would you see that happening? Absolutely not. You've seen the footballers on their knees, Black Lives Matter, let's protect all the migrants. Well, I tell you what, to all those footballers at Manchester United and Liverpool supporting that, open your homes in Hale Barns and the leafy areas of Cheshire. Let's fill the hotels around Cheshire. Instead of having football agents, let's fill them with the migrants, because you'll be looking after them, giving them dinner parties in your big estates, won't you? The answer is they won't. They are hypocritical. They're liars when it comes to their belief that they support others. What they believe is not in my backyard, but in somebody else's. And maybe the government should adopt a policy that says anybody who believes in this comes out on Twitter, we're going to second your home and take it over and put the migrants there. Now let's see how you believe in the consequences of your own words.
Well, yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, see how Hugh Grant likes that. Thank you very much, Stephen Wolfe. Great to have you on the show, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Right, now, as you've been hearing, it was a heated exchange between Prime Minister and Keir Starmer, as well, at PMQs earlier today. They clashed on the government's response to the migrant crisis. Joining me now from College Green, where she's been relentlessly harangued by bizarre protesters throughout the course of this shift so far, and I think it might have stopped now, but we'll have to wait and see, is our very own, the wonderful Olivia Utley. Olivia, great to still have you there. Right, OK, so heated exchanges, and basically Keir Starmer said that Rishi Sunak needs to get a grip of what's been going on in the Channel. Rishi Sunak said, well, we're trying, because we want to enact quicker deportations to stop this surge of Albanian immigrants. Closing a loophole. Explain the loophole to me.
So the loophole is the Modern Slavery Act, which was the crowning jewel of Theresa May's premiership, at least as far as she was concerned. And it specifies that anyone who can claim to be a victim of modern slavery can claim asylum in the UK. Usually, of course, the only people who can claim asylum in the UK are those who are being persecuted in their own countries or are living in war-torn countries. The problem is that the word claim is doing quite a lot of heavy lifting there, because there are lots of people, there have been 5,000 Albanians, for example, so far this year, who've claimed that they are victims of modern slavery. It seems because they have worked out that this is a loophole in the law, which makes it much easier for them to get around Britain's quite complex immigration system. And once they've claimed to be a victim of modern slavery, there are armies of human rights lawyers who are ready to fight for them through the courts, which has created this huge backlog, which is why we're ending up with situations like the one in Manston over the last few days.
No, indeed, and this is an issue that's not going away any time soon when it comes to public order, etc. And we've got a case, haven't we, of something like £6 million a day now it's costing the British taxpayer to house these people. Keir Starmer, some would argue, all mouth and no trousers. What's his plan?
Well, yes, I've actually been just speaking to a former Labour MP now who thinks that Keir Starmer doesn't really have a plan. What he keeps saying is that we've got to open channels of communication with the French. But of course, lots of previous Home Secretaries have tried to do just that. But there isn't a huge incentive for French politicians to bear the brunt of the burden of the British immigration crisis. Other than that, it's pretty clear that Yvette Cooper, who would be his Home Secretary in a Labour government, would reverse the Rwanda policy straight away. He keeps talking about how ineffective it is, and to be fair to Keir Starmer, no migrants have yet been deported to Rwanda. But ending that small boat trade is going to be very, very difficult. And we've seen countless Home Secretaries come up against the problem and find no solution at all. Under international treaty, Britain is obliged to look at least at any claim for political asylum that comes our way. And once they're in the system, there's a backlog very, very quickly. There aren't enough people to process these claims, and they have to be done properly. So it's all very well at the moment we're seeing Keir Starmer dig the heel into Rishi Sunak, but it isn't clear yet what he would do. Perhaps that's the glory of being in opposition.
Yeah, and now I was sat here yesterday, actually, Olivia, and I was saying, well, isn't it about time that Rishi Sunak backed Braverman? Because I felt very sorry for Suella. She was stood in the House of Commons a couple of days ago like a one-woman battering ram, just defending, I think, against I would argue, a bit of a woke mob who was saying that, oh, you know, she's got to do this, she's got to do that, she's got to resign. And she stood there, and in the end, she went, you know what, actually, I do think we're being invaded. I've had enough of this, frankly, tosh. We are not dealing with every single person here who's supposedly a refugee or asylum seeker. She actually came out and said what we're all thinking. And she felt very isolated. She looked very isolated. I felt sorry for her. I was worried she was going to get hung out to dry. And if she went again, with it would go the hope of a lot of normal British people who, frankly, want to see this chaos stop. But Rishi Sunak did back her today, didn't he? What did he say? What did he do?
Well, he did. He threw his weight behind Suella Braverman. And it's interesting that because it feels now as though Suella Braverman, although, as you say, looked quite isolated in the House of Commons yesterday, beyond Parliament, she is actually in a very, very strong position. And some people now are saying that she's shoring up the Prime Minister. She has the Conservative Party membership on her side, and lots of people think she has most of the country on her side as well. Rishi Sunak chose not to promote Kemi Badenoch, who's another of the heroes, we might say, of the right of the Conservative Party in his latest reshuffle, which means that all the hopes for the right of his own party, inside Westminster, yes, but also outside of it, are pinned on Suella Braverman. So it felt today as though, yes, he backed her, and in doing so, that was his way to shore up his own premiership before it gets fractured at this first hurdle.
Olivia, thank you very, very much. Olivia Utley there, our political reporter, just outside Westminster for us. It's interesting to see that some of those protesters have now upgraded themselves to have light-up EU flags. I wonder if there's some symbolism there for their intellect. The lights are on, but nobody's at home. Coming up, this is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. 2 Met police officers have been sentenced to jail for sharing offensive WhatsApp messages with Sarah Everard's killer. They've been granted permission to appeal. We will have all of those details after this very short break. Stay tuned.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Hello
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Welcome back, everybody. GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. Right, OK, loads of people getting in touch. Thank you very much, everybody. Keep those emails coming, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Very serious story now, though, because two Met police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison after sharing grossly offensive messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens, believe it or not, the murderer of Sarah Everard, the former police officer, of course, who did that despicable crime. PC Jonathan Cobban and former PC Joel Borders have been bailed ahead of an appeal against their convictions. It comes as a new report by the police watchdog says a culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour still exists in many police forces. Shocking timing, this, for the police, really. It's on the front of a lot of the national newspapers I've got here in front of me, which is just the extent to which people are getting through a vetting process. I know there's a recruitment crisis, but for goodness sake, do we have to be recruiting people who've been done for sexual offences and burgling and all this stuff? Anyway, it criticises poor police vetting standards. Corrupt officers could potentially be serving in England and Wales. How bad is it, really? Joining us now from outside Westminster Magistrates Court is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. I suppose, Mark, we'll just start again with the latest. You are outside that court. So what went on inside that court earlier today?
Yeah, well, Jonathan Cobban and Joel Borders were convicted in September of passing these messages in this WhatsApp group with the now jailed former police officer PC Wayne Couzens, who is, of course, we know went on to abduct, rape and murder Sarah Everard in March of last year. Well, as far as the sentence is concerned, the judge felt that only a custodial sentence was the right sentence to pass because of what she saw was the higher harm that this WhatsApp group, in terms of the messages, was actually, propagating. Because although they were not, they argue, using these messages to be used or more widely disseminated, there was still harm and grossly offensive messages that these individual officers were involved in passing, jokes and comments about tasering people with disabilities, including people with Down syndrome. Also misogynist jokes about victims of domestic violence and homophobic comments as well, particularly with regard to one particular person and one of the officers was supposedly guarding at hospital. So some real very offensive messages that were being shared. The officers are going to appeal this 3-month prison sentence, and that will take place in the coming weeks. So what the judge agreed to today was to allow these two officers to be bailed in the meantime, but obviously if that appeal does not go their way, then they will be facing 3 months in prison.
The report as well, Mark. I mean, the timing of this particular court case that you were at today could not have been worse, really, for the police, because the report has just come out, which appears to show, anyway, the vetting process for police officers is pretty shocking, can be pretty shocking. People slipping through the net, if, frankly, indeed, there's even a net at all. Some bosses hired recruits without conducting face-to-face interviews. All right, that's one thing. But the fact is that some people apparently have committed sexual offences, have been known to be corrupt, or have committed other crimes and are now police officers on the streets. It raises serious questions, Mark, about if the police can't really even police their own recruitment procedure, can they police the street?
Yeah, I mean, it's very serious and very worrying. This was a report commissioned by the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, after the conviction of PC Wayne Couzens. And she wanted to know just what the vetting procedures were like, whether they were robust enough, and whether a culture of misogyny and racism and otherwise, pretty horrific views were prevalent within the police. And this inspectorate carried out a check of 8 forces, a representative sample of the 43 forces across England and Wales. They checked the vetting records of some 700 odd individuals and found that about 120 of those should either never have been allowed into the police service, or at least proper questioning and flagging should have taken place with a view to determining the suitability of these individuals actually to become police officers. And as you say, all kinds of issues about the kind of activities that they were up to, such as pursuing women out on the street, stopping them for vehicle checks if they were particularly good-looking women, senior officers going after female colleagues as well. Lots of really worrying and concerning activity, which, as far as the vetting procedures are concerned, are just not robust enough, according to the inspectorate, to weed out what are effectively bad cops.
Yeah, Mark White, thank you very, very much. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. I've just got very, very quick time now for some of your views, ladies and gentlemen. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I've been asking you to get in touch, frankly, really, about the main issue, which is, were you aware? I'm sure you have been if you've been watching this show or listening to it. 4 councils now, including Labour councils, have taken legal action against the Home Office to say, no, we've had enough of migrant hotels now. It's damaging our economy, it's damaging safety, it's costing us jobs, it's frankly just not what we actually want, OK? So would you want your council now to be getting in touch with the Home Office and saying enough is enough? Ian says, I'm sure there must be a spare room or 2 in Downing Street. Let Rishi take in some migrants. Paul says, Patrick, put the migrants on trains. They'll be too expensive for British people to use if Lynch has his way. You could then move them around the country so everyone takes a turn at having them in their backyard. Yes, OK, fine. I mean, I don't think you're being serious there, but it's an interesting one. We had big disused ferries as well, and boats being pitched as a topic. So GB News viewers and listeners are actually doing their best to try to come up with a workable solution. But on a more serious note, loads of you have been getting in touch to say, I feel very uncomfortable about this in my local area, people losing their jobs as a result of it. I want to know, are you going to be going and urging your local council to take legal action against the Home Office to stop migrant hotels in your backyard? GBviews at gbnews.uk. And coming up, another absolutely damning story, people. New figures reveal the excess deaths in England and Wales are currently running higher than in the main pandemic years of 2020 and 2021. What could have caused that, I wonder? Oh, dare I say it's lockdowns? Well, what's the solution? It can't be to give the NHS more cash. 20 billion in 2018, 81 billion shot in the arm over the course of the pandemic, 36 billion in September last year. Starting to think that the NHS is just a black hole and a money pit, and frankly it needs radical reform because people like relatives of you and I are not getting the treatment that they deserve. There is a backlog because of the way that we handled the pandemic. That's the view of some, but first, your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Hello to you. The top stories. 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison for sending grossly offensive messages in a WhatsApp group with Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. PC Jonathan Cobban and former PC Joel Borders shared messages of a racist, homophobic and misogynistic nature in the chat in 2019. They've been bailed ahead of an appeal against their convictions at the High Court. Meanwhile, thousands of corrupt police officers could be serving in England and Wales, with a new report blaming poor vetting. After examining 8 forces, the police watchdog found officers who'd previously been convicted of domestic abuse or accused of sexual assault were taken on and employed. It says the vetting process is questionable at best and found it a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour against female police officers. The Prime Minister's conceded not enough asylum claims have been processed, but he says action is being taken to fix that. Rishi Sunak, who's been under pressure to sack his Home Secretary Suella Braverman, defended her during PMQs today, saying they're both on the same page when it comes to tackling migration. Challenging the Prime Minister, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, blamed the Conservatives for breaking the asylum system. Meanwhile, Downing Street says the Prime Minister is reviewing the pledges he made during the Tory leadership campaign to decide if they're still deliverable. And earlier today, Rishi Sunak reversed his decision not to attend the COP27 climate summit, saying he will now be at the event in Egypt next week. And the United States is accusing North Korea of covertly supplying Russia with a significant number of artillery shells for its war in Ukraine. The White House says Pyongyang is trying to obscure the shipments by funneling them through countries in the Middle East and North Africa. Meanwhile, suspending shipments, Russia has announced it'll now resume its participation in the UN-brokered Black Sea deal to export grain. Those are your headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Let's get a quick snapshot then of today's markets, and the pound will buy you $1.1455 and 1.1611 euros. If you want some gold, it's £1,437.30 an ounce, and the FTSE closed at 7,144 points.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Christys here on GB News Live. Just before we talk about this massive story that's dropping at the moment about excess deaths in our NHS at the minute. I just want to draw your attention to what's been our main topic of the day. I'm going to go to these emails very, very shortly. gbviews@gbnews.uk about whether or not you now want your local council to take legal action against the Home Office to stop migrant hotels in your area. I'm running a poll on this at the moment, and 88.3% of you have said that you do want your local council to try to block migrant hotels. Get in touch on that email address you can see on your screens there. If you're listening on radio, it's gbviews@gbnews.uk. What's the situation like in your particular town or city? What do you want your council to do about it? Frankly, now people have had enough. But another story that I think will be very, very close to a lot of your hearts, certainly in relation to exposing a lot of what I think many of us thought was true about lockdowns, about our response to the coronavirus pandemic, and indeed the efficacy of our National Health Service. The latest figures from the Office for National Statistics show that excess deaths in England and Wales are now currently running higher than during the COVID pandemic. Yeah. Throughout October, there have been an average of 1,564 extra deaths per week. 1,500 excess deaths per week. Does anyone else smell a pandemic here, anyone? No? Compared with a weekly average of just 315 in 2020 and 1,300 in 2021. Experts have warned that some deaths have been caused by, quote, collateral damage from the pandemic. I don't really like that turn of phrase, actually. As well as a huge backlog of people waiting for treatment. There have been concerns about the general public simply not seeking help as they're too anxious about burdening an already strained health service. Madness, madness, madness. Joining me now is health editor at the Sunday Express. It's Lucy Johnston. Lucy, if you couldn't tell, I'm quite worked up about all of this because it feels like I was shouting into the void during the various different lockdowns that we had, saying we're going to end up paying the price for this, both financially and in terms of public health. 1,500 excess deaths a week. This is pandemic territory. Where's Chris Whitty?
It is pandemic territory, and where is Chris Whitty indeed? As we know, tens of thousands of people were unable to get heart treatment, cancer treatment during the pandemic, and you can't kick underlying health conditions down the road. It just doesn't work. And so we now have pandemic levels of extra or excess deaths way above the 5-year average, in fact, above the 8-year average. And there's sort of radio silence from government. They seem to be so distracted with Partygate, Emailgate, whether Rishi's going to COP27, and it seems that this is an emergency, and we need a task force really to look at it and to find out what's going on.
You know what I think it is, Lucy, as well? I think that this is a dereliction of duty from the vast majority of the British media. The media were clamouring for lockdowns. Lockdowns, lockdowns, lockdowns. It was like lockdown porn. They couldn't get enough of it. They were saying, we've got to shackle ourselves to the radiator in Chris Whitty's basement, for goodness sake. Why haven't you locked down harder, faster, longer, stronger? It was non-stop. Meanwhile, by the way, a lot of people were breaking the rules themselves. Then they wanted us to biff a Prime Minister because he apparently had a bit of cheese and wine and some cake. And actually now we're looking at the embodiment of what these policies meant, which is that something like 1,500 people are dying excessively per week in the UK. And the media are just going to sweep it under the rug because they helped to cause this as much, in my opinion, as Chris Whitty. What on earth can we do now to sort this out? Because I'm sick and I'm not paying for this. I'm sorry, I'm not. 20 billion quid in 2018 from Theresa May. She increased the NHS budget for that. 81 billion quid during COVID. 36 billion quid from Boris Johnson in September last year. I've had enough of this. I'm not paying to clean up their mess anymore.
Well, it's true, but to be fair, there is no one really knows why there's a huge number of excess deaths. I mean, you and I probably can guess that a lot of that is to do with the collapse of the emergency health system, the fact that people weren't treated early on, but we don't have a clear sort of set of figures that can lead us to explaining, exactly what's going on. And there's the rub. That's the problem. We need to look into it. We need a special task force with coroners, with statisticians, with, Chris Whitty. Where is he now? I mean, where are all of them? We need a proper look at this. Exactly right. I mean, it was predictable. And, when we had a focus on one single disease without looking at the ripple effect of what would happen if we did lock down, it was kind of warned by many people, including you, including I, that, this could happen. You needed to look at the wider consequences of a lockdown and what would be the ripple effect. And again, austerity will also cause many deaths, and that's a legacy of lockdown. So we need to urgently look at why this is happening and then mitigate it. And I think for the NHS, I think it's time to let clinicians decide how to run their health services. I think the government's just so keen to always get involved and to interfere and to be, doing the glory thing and saying we're doing this and we're doing that. But actually, the measures they take, the targets they make can often do more harm than good. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, Lucy, as well? I mean, I've been taking the mickey out of little Matty Hancock for some time now, and I make no excuses for that. I mean, he'll have to take it on the chin or his five head. But at the same time, actually, I read things like this now and these excess deaths, and I find the idea that he might be coining in something like 350 grand to go on I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Presumably the term celebrity comes from the fact that he stood in front of the nation every day during lockdown, during the coronavirus crisis. And now I'm looking at 1,500 excess deaths a week. I'm looking at people who turn to alcoholism as a result of some of these lockdown measures, the domestic abuse cases, the drastic impacts it had on children's education. Every 5 days, a university student kills themselves, and no one can tell me that's not a result of the fact that they were locked away and locked up with people they'd never met before. And look at the maniacal grin on that bloke's face if you're watching us on television. Good grief, he's going in the jungle and coining it in. It makes me absolutely sick. Is celebrity there as a result of that? I mean, some would argue it's profiting from people's lives. Sorry, Lucy, I've gone off on a tangent there, but I make no excuses for it. Lucy, I'm going to have to let you get going. Health editor at the Sunday Express there, Lucy Johnson. Now, moving away to another issue that frankly grinds my gears like nothing else, or at least I am grinding gears because this lot won't be. Trade union members lobbied MPs today and called for an immediate general election. They're campaigning for a £15 minimum wage, enhanced workers' rights, as well as bargaining rights for whole industries and a protection of the right to strike. The RMT General Secretary, everybody's favourite trade unionist, Mick Lynch, told GB News earlier that the government ought to be negotiating with the unions. And what does former Transport Minister Norman Baker of the Campaign for Better Transport make of it all? Norman, thank you very much. I mean, forget better transport, it'd just be nice to have some. Trying to get on the Avanti West coastline it's just non-existent.
The Avanti West coastline is a disaster at the moment, I have to say. And for those of us at the Campaign for Better Transport, whose remit is really to help deliver good public transport and encourage people to use buses and trains, which is good for the economy, good for the environment and good for social mobility, it's deeply depressing to have such a poor service on one line in particular, but also on TransPennine, and also to have uncertainty to when people can travel because of the array of strikes going on. It's not good news for train users.
Look, let's just get down to brass tacks on this. Do they deserve a pay rise? Because from where I'm sitting, I don't see it.
Well, some rail workers, not drivers particularly, but some rail workers on the track and in lower paid jobs do actually deserve a pay rise. We all deserve a pay rise when inflation is going to run at 10%. So I don't begrudge them that, but I do believe that there's a deal to be done. The deal to be done is they have to abandon some of these ancient restrictions which have been in place in some cases for a century or more. For example, no Sunday working and things like that, which when Sunday's now a major day on the railway. So the deal to be struck really is that the unions accept life has moved on and abandon some of these restrictions, and in return the money which is released, because there would be money released from that, for greater efficiency, genuine efficiency, can be used to give a pay rise. That's a deal which has been there from day one, really, and the sooner we get to that point, the better.
That he felt that the vast majority of the British public were on side. He offered absolutely no evidence up to back that up. Do you think that the vast majority of the British public are on side with him?
I genuinely think, I mean, I may be wrong, but I think that the British public would probably endorse, I hope, what I've just said, which is that they're entitled to a pay rise like anybody else is, but they must get rid of these restrictions which are at no place in the railway of 2022.
I can't help but feel, Norman, just final question, like, actually, this isn't really just about a pay rise at all. This is a bloke who's smelled his opportunity for fame and he's decided to take it all. It's probably someone who's presiding over a bunch of rabid trots who decide they want to bring down a Tory government, and they think that they can do it by trying to cripple the spine of the country. And it's no coincidence, is it, that we're seeing it in turn with, potentially with nurses and other sectors of society. I'm sorry, but just because you work in the public sector doesn't mean you're entitled for a pay rise in line with inflation. We're not all getting one, are we?
Well, I mean, nobody's entitled to a pay rise, but I think people are legitimate asked to make, particularly those who've been restricted in terms of their pay rises over the last 10 years. So don't begrudge them that. Are there people in the unions who want to make a political point and bring down the government? Yes, of course there are, but that doesn't detract from the general argument. So I think we need to separate out those who've got a political agenda with those who are legitimately trying to improve conditions for the people who, are in their unions.
All right, good stuff, Norman. Thank you very much. Former Transport Minister Norman Baker there of the Campaign for Better Transport, just responding to Mick Lynch's latest. Labour has accused Matt Hancock of treating his constituents with contempt by jetting off to the jungle for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The former Health Sec has defended his position, suggesting that he's heading to the jungle to go to where the people are and not sit in ivory towers in Westminster. He might want to go to a care home and see what the people there think of him. But anyway, he also insisted if he hadn't lost his marbles after being suspended from the Parliamentary Conservative Party, depending on how he fares during the public vote, MP Hancock could remain in the jungle for weeks. But does he have what it takes to survive in the wild at the mercy of the elements of snakes and spiders? With me in the studio right now is entertainment correspondent Ellie Phillips. Ellie, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So, Matt Hancock, with your entertainment hat on, how well do you think he's going to fare? Because I hope it's an absolute disaster for the lad.
So actually, before I came on, I spoke to Coral, the bookmakers, and he's odds-on favourite to be to make history, basically, to stay in quite a while, but break history as the campmate to have done the most Bush Tucker trials.
Good.
So it seems like people are very eager to see him suffer. This is a record previously held by Janice Dickinson, who back in 2007, she did 8 of these trials. At the same time, he's also 3-1 to be the first voted out. I don't think that's going to happen. I think people are going to keep him in a good while, and they want revenge. People want to see him eat all sorts, being plunged into water.
I'd like to see a return to 90s television where at some point they drop his ex-wife in there.
I love that, throw her in the mix.
Just lob her in.
100%, that would be amazing, because I think that's the reason people are so annoyed at him. You've got to remember that during peak COVID, he was in this ivory tower where they made these rules, everyone else had to stay at home, they couldn't have any meaningful contact.
He's snogging the face off his top eight.
Exactly, so people are like, OK, and the thing you mentioned before, which I wanted to pick up on, you said celebrity, what is that? Now, I think there's a difference between fame and celebrity. Famous is when a lot of people know you and you don't know them, but celebrity is that you're celebrated. No one celebrates Matt Hancock. No. So it feels odd that he's in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And the other thing I don't really agree with is the fact that he's a sitting politician. I don't mind, I think, if you finished your political career like Stanley Johnson when he went on to I'm a Celebrity, absolutely, you do you, whatever you want to do. But this is a guy who we're paying to do a job and he's not doing it. You know, look at who else is in there. Jill Scott, she was a lioness. She's now retired. But if she was still in the squad, I can't imagine her saying to England guys, oh, I'm just going to go off for 3 weeks, and then when I come back, am I all right to jump back in? They'll be like, absolutely not. You've got to be part of the team. You've got to be at those training sessions. So I think it's more a question of when he's doing this rather than the fact he's doing it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I think, by the way, there has to be a lot of credit to the bookers of I'm a Celebrity, and I don't blame them at all. No. This is a massive coup.
Absolutely.
I think it's great. That's great stuff. They should be celebrating massively, because I now will be watching I'm a Celebrity for the first time in years.
Him suffer.
To see Matt Hancock eating a kangaroo's penis. And I cannot wait to see that. But no amount of kangaroo penis, and I never thought I'd say this, will make it up for what's gone on, what is the damage that he's done to this country.
The other thing is, as well, he is a huge signing. He's reported to be getting £350,000 to do this, which he's saying he will donate some of to a local charity. You know, and this goes on the back of like other politicians, like I said, who have done it. You've got the likes of Nadine Dorries herself, who's done it previously. She was voted off really early on, but not before she ate, what did she eat? She ate an ostrich anus and a lamb's testicle. So, you know, I think people want to see the politicians be put through the mill and then vote them off.
That sounds like a delicacy. I'm sure this is where we have some viewers going, that's a delicacy in my country. But there we go. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, as always. And yes, that's Ellie Phillips there, of course. Entertainment correspondent reacting to the fact that little Matty Hancock is going to cop it left, right and centre in the jungle, not before time. Up next is Jubes & Co. with Michelle Dewberry, who's right here in the studio. Michelle, what have you got coming up?
Hello, Patrick. Lots of conversations out there at the moment about the economy. What should it look like going forward? So that is the question that I'm posing tonight. Is it time for more austerity or not? What does that even mean, by the way? What would that look like? And Gen Z, Gen Z, I don't know, people call it different things, but I'm not in America, so I'll call it Generation Z. Are they the most illiberal generation yet? I want to look at that. And child migrants. 200 odd of them have gone missing from hotels in the UK, which leads me to ask the question, how do you even identify what is a child when it comes to the Channel crossings? Suella Braverman has the answer, apparently. X-ray them. Predictably, many are up in arms. But is that the answer or not?
Well, this is it, or dental records or something like that. I mean, yes, I will never forget the picture of that 40-year-old bloke in a kid's maths class that emerged a couple of years ago. There we are. Michelle Dewberry, thank you very much. It's going to be an absolute rip-roarer of a show. Jubes and Co, don't go anywhere. That comes up next. Thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch throughout the course of this show. Like I've said before, it is you lovely people at home or listening on your radio or watching online or on social media that make the world go round as far as I'm concerned. Thank you so much, everybody. I will be back again at 3 p.m. tomorrow to set the world to rights. Up next, it's Jubes and Co. Don't go anywhere. See you tomorrow, people.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Wet and windy weather returns from the west during the rest of today. Heavy rain in places, coastal gales. We've already seen that in many spots, but it will be sweeping its way eastwards as the day goes on. This low pressure in charge, that's just to the northwest of the country at the moment, and there's a particularly active cold front moving into western areas as we speak. That's got some lively rain, some very gusty winds associated with it. Gales around Irish Sea coast transferring into the south coast as well as eastern Scotland for a time. The heaviest of the rain, though, by the end of the night will be across East Anglia and the southeast. Showers follow, and those showers will be most frequent towards the north and west of Scotland. Again, gales here, 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts, but where we get some shelter from the breeze, it is actually a chilly start to Thursday, so some spots in Scotland, northern England, dipping into the low single figures. Milder towards the southeast, but wetter here with some heavy rain continuing during the morning. Coming and going, I think, with that rain during the afternoon, but at times East Anglia and the southeast will stay wet. Showers will continue elsewhere, particularly across western parts of the country, and a keen gusty wind, particularly towards the southwest. A fresher feel, there will be some sunshine out there, temperatures at 13 or 14 Celsius, a bit lower than they have been. But it's going to be a lively evening, and into the early hours of Friday, some downpours will continue across southwestern and southern shores in particular, fuelled by warm seas here. Hail and thunder always a possibility, and the risk of some more prolonged heavy rain affecting southern counties of England. Elsewhere, clear spells and a chilly start to Friday, actually. Temperatures down below zero in some sheltered spots across northern parts of the UK, -3, -4 Celsius in some sheltered Scotland glens. But after that early chill, actually it's a bright day. There'll still be further showers in the west, but in between sunny spells. And it's going to feel fresher on Friday.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.